The sky split in two that night, not with thunder or lightning, but with a quiet, impossible doubling of the moon. One orb, pale and familiar, hung low over the forbidden forest, casting silver streaks across the lake. The other, a fainter ghostly echo, drifted just beside it, translucent as mist, pulsing with a rhythm that did not match the tides. Harry stood at the edge of the astronomy tower, the cold stone biting through his robes, his breath curling in the air like smoke. He hadn't meant to come here. He'd only been walking, restless, drawn by something he couldn't name. But when he looked up and saw the twin moons, his chest tightened as if a hand had closed around his heart. Below, laughter rose from the courtyard. Students pointed and shouted, some conjuring fireworks to salute the phenomenon. Even the professor seemed amused, murmuring about rare planetary alignments and atmospheric refractions. But Harry didn't believe in coincidences, not after 20 years of war, lost, and magic that bent toward meaning. A soft footfall behind him. He didn't turn. "You see it too," Luna said, her voice quiet like the hush between heartbeats. He nodded. "It's not natural." "No," she agreed, stepping beside him. "It's remembering." He glanced at her then. Her wide, pale eyes reflected both moons, one solid, one wavering, as if she could see through the illusion. Her hair, silver blonde and loose, stirred in a wind he couldn't feel. "Remembering what?" "The veil," she whispered. "It's not closed as tightly as they think." A chill ran down his spine, deeper than the night air. The Department of Mysteries. The archway. Sirius. So many voices lost in the whispering dark. He hadn't been back since the war, couldn't bear to, but now something stirred in his pocket. Warmth, sudden and sharp. He pulled out his wand, and then stopped. His Patronus had come. Not as a spell, not summoned, but simply star there. Star, a silvery stag materializing beside him on the tower ledge, its form flickering like a candle in a draught. It didn't prance or charge. It turned its head slowly, deliberately, and looked at the second moon. Then it spoke. Not in words, not exactly, but a feeling bloomed in Harry's mind, clear as a bell, cold as starlight. Star, not moon. Prison. Star. Luna exhaled, sharply. Her own wand trembled in her hand. From its tip, a hair emerged. Not the usual form, but something older, stranger. Its fur was threaded with starlight, its eyes deep as voids. It didn't hop, it glided, floating just above the stones, and circled the stag once before facing the same ghostly moon. "They're not changing," Luna murmured. "They're waking." Harry watched as the stag dipped its antlers toward the spectral orb, then turned to him. Its eyes, bright, sentient, held his. And in that gaze he saw not protection, but warning, a plea. "Star, too close. It dreams. It reaches. Star." The warmth faded. Both creatures dissolved into mist, leaving only the cold and the twin lights above. Below, the students still laughed, but Harry felt the weight of centuries pressing down, ancient, impatient. Something had been sealed away, long before Voldemort, long before Dumbledore, perhaps before Hogwarts itself. And now, with the sky split open and the Patronuses whispering, the lock was rattling. Luna touched his arm, gentle as a breath. "They've chosen us, Harry. Not because we're strong, because we've both stood at the edge." And listened. He looked at her then, really looked. Not the dreamy girl from Ravenclaw, not the odd one they'd once whispered about, but someone who had always seen the unseen. And for the first time in years he wasn't afraid of what was coming. He was ready. Rain tapped steadily against the high-arched windows of the great hall, casting wavering reflections across the polished stone floor. The usual bustle of students had quieted to a hush, replaced by the soft crackle of torchlight and the occasional whisper of nervous anticipation. Harry stood near the staff table, his wand resting lightly in his hand, gaze sweeping over the wide-eyed first years seated at the house tables. It was a tradition he'd agreed to, showing them the Patronus charm. Something simple, something safe. "Remember," he said, voice calm but caring. "A Patronus isn't just light, it's memory. It's the brightest moment you can recall. Hold on to it tightly." He raised his wand, centering himself. The familiar warmth stirred in his chest, a quiet ember from years of practice. He focused on the memory, sunlight breaking through the clouds after the final battle, Ginny's hand in his, the scent of wet grass and distant laughter. He exhaled. Expecto Patronum. A shimmering silver light erupted from the tip of his wand, coalescing into the shape of the stag, but not as he remembered it. It stood taller, its antlers broader, more intricate, like ancient branches etched in moonlight. Its coat shivered with an odd depth, as if the silver wasn't just light, but something alive, shifting subtly beneath the surface. The stag didn't prance or bow or glide toward the students as it should have. Instead, it turned its head, slowly, and fixed Harry with eyes that held not reflection, but awareness. He froze. The stag stepped forward, not in demonstration, but with purpose. Its hooves made no sound on the stone, yet the air thickened with each movement. It circled him once, then paused, angling its muzzle toward the northern wall, toward the corridor that led to the old astronomy tower. A murmur rippled through the students. "Professor Potter?" a Hufflepuff girl whispered. "Is that supposed to happen?" Harry didn't answer. His pulse thudded in his ears. He'd seen Patronuses change. Everyone's had after the celestial event last spring, when the twin moons hung in the sky for 7 nights and the veil trembled. But those changes were subtle. A different animal, perhaps, or a shift in color. Not this, not sentience. He tried again. Expecto Patronum. Another stag burst forth, identical to the first. And again, it ignored the crowd, ignored the charm's intent, and moved to stand beside its twin. Together they faced the same direction, heads lowered slightly, as if scenting something on a wind no one else could feel. Then in unison they charged, not at Harry, not in play, but toward the wall. They passed through it like mist, leaving behind only a faint glow that lingered like breath on glass. Silence, then chaos. "Did you see that?" It went star through star the wall. "Professor, what was that?" Harry lowered his wand, his fingers numb. He forced a smile, thin and unconvincing. "Just a new kind of Patronus. Must be the weather, or the wards. I'll look into it." But he knew it wasn't the weather, it wasn't the wards. That night, as he paced the headmaster's study, a letter arrived, pale blue envelope, sealed with a wax impression of a crescent moon and a raven. He recognized the handwriting. "Star Harry, star head red, star mind spoke to me today. Not in words, in feelings, like a dream you can't forget. It showed me a door in the moor, beneath the standing stones. I think it wants us to go there. Meet me at dawn. Luna Star." He stared at the words, then out the window, where the clouds parted, just enough to reveal the faintest sliver of a second moon, hanging low and silent in the sky. His fingers brushed the cold glass. The Patronus hadn't been showing off. It had been warning him. The wind howled through the stone arches of the Hogwarts main gate, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something sharp and electric, like the air after lightning has struck. Luna Lovegood stepped forward, her pale blonde hair lifting like sea foam in the gust, her wide eyes reflecting the bruised twilight sky. She carried no luggage, only a worn satchel slung across her shoulder, and a quiet intensity that made the 2 patrolling Aurors hesitate before approaching. "You're not on the approved visitor list, miss," one said, hand resting near his wand. Luna turned her gaze slowly toward him, unafraid. "Thestrals won't eat near the Forbidden Forest anymore. The centaurs have stopped watching the stars, and the house elves in the kitchens are whispering in a language that wasn't spoken here since Rowena Ravenclaw walked these halls." She tilted her head. "I think that qualifies as urgent, don't you?" The Aurors exchanged glances. Strange reports had been flooding the Ministry for weeks, creatures acting out of instinct, magical anomalies blooming like scars across the landscape. But no one had come to Hogwarts with such clarity, not until now. "I need to see Harry," she said simply. Harry Potter was in the Defense Against the Dark Arts office, grading 4th-year essays on boggarts when the fireplace flared green. Luna stepped through, brushing soot from her robes with a distracted hand. She looked older than he remembered, thinner, her face sharpened by something beyond time. But her eyes were the same, distant, knowing, like she could see the threads of magic the rest of them only guessed at. "Luna," like she said, rising. "I wasn't expecting you." "The moon is wrong," she replied. "Not in position. In Star Purpose Star, Manifestin, it doesn't pull the tides the way it used to. It pulls star a star, Ra. He set down his quill. "What's happening?" She walked to the window, her fingers trailing the cold glass. Outside, the lake shimmered unnaturally, its surface broken by slow, concentric ripples that didn't match the wind. When the Patronuses changed, we thought it was a fluke. A ripple from the veil, maybe, or some cosmic imbalance. But mine star speaks star. Harry stilled. Harry stayed. At first it was just sounds, whispers beneath laughter, then riddles. She turned to face him, her voice softening. "It says the watchers are waking. The door has no lock, but the key remembers the hand that turned it. And last night it showed me a face in the mist. A face I'd never seen, but it called me Star Sister Star, with 7. A cold weight settled in Harry's chest. His own Patronus, a stag, steady and silent for years, had flickered twice in the past fortnight, once forming antlers that branched like roots, once letting out a sound that wasn't a roar, but a sigh. "I felt it too," he admitted. "Not words, but direction, like it's trying to lead me somewhere, to star her star, or..." Then his breath caught. "You've seen her, not her, but I dream of a garden made of bones, and a woman standing at the edge of a lake, holding a mirror that shows no reflection." They stood in silence, the space between them humming with unspoken recognition. The air thickened, and from Luna's wand, unbidden, a silvery hair erupted, not bounding away, but turning to face them, its long ears twitching. It opened its mouth, and though no sound came, the words formed in both their minds, clear and ancient. "Star, she walks where memory sleeps. Find the well beneath the willow, before the veil forgets to breathe." Star Luna exhaled. "It's not just warning us, Harry. It's guiding us. And whatever's coming, it knows we're looking." Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the high-arched windows of the Ministry of Magic, each drop echoing like a whisper in the cavernous atrium. Harry stood beneath the golden statue of the wizard, dwarfed by its grandeur, his boots leaving faint damp marks on the polished marble. The air smelled of ink, old parchment, and the faint metallic tang of enchanted elevators descending into the bowels of the building. He clutched a sealed report in his hand, the parchment already wrinkled from his grip. He'd seen it again last night. His Patronus, the familiar silver stag, hadn't just formed. It has paused, turned its great head toward him, as if considering. Then, instead of dissolving, it had lowered its antlers and charged, not at him, but through the garden wall, vanishing into the dark, like it was chasing something only it could see. And when it faded, a voice, not his own, had lingered in the air like mist. "Star, not here, not safe." Star Harry hadn't slept since. At the front desk, a young wizard with thinning hair and round spectacles barely looked up. "Name and purpose?" "Harry Potter, here to file a formal observation under the Department of Mysteries Protocol 7. That got a flicker of attention. The clerk adjusted his glasses. "Patronus irregularity. Yes. Ah." A knowing smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Another one. We've had 3 this week. Magical fluctuation, probably. The aurora last month. Everyone's magic is a bit wobbly. Honestly, it's like people think every sneeze is a prophecy now." Harry exhaled slowly. "This isn't just a change in form, it's behavior." Mind spoke. The clerk blinked. Spoke? Not in words, but intent. Direction. It wasn't random, it was warning me. The man scribbled on a clipboard. "Noted. We'll log it under anomalous manifestation, likely temporary. You'll receive a response in 6 to 8 weeks. That's not fast enough. Something's wrong. The Thestrals at Hogwarts have been restless. Centaurs are refusing to give readings. And Luna Lovegood, she's seen the same thing. Her Patronus, a hare, led her to an abandoned well in Dorset. There were bones down there, human, but not recent, magical residue too." "Old dark," the clerk sighed, tapping his quill. "Look, Mr. Potter, we appreciate your diligence. Truly, but the Department of Mysteries has reviewed the phenomenon, correlated it with lunar cycles, ley line fluctuations, even the migration patterns of mooncalves. Everything points to a brief magical surge, self-correcting, Harmless. Harmless? Harry's voice rose. Then, why did my Patronus, something made of my happiest memory, look at me like it didn't recognize me? Look, it was trying to tell me something beyond words. The clerk finally met his eyes, his expression softening. Pitying. With all due respect, sir, after everything you've been through, it's natural to look for patterns. To see threats where there are none. Maybe it's stress, maybe it's grief, that the ministry is immobilizing over dreams and feelings. Harry stared at him, the hum of the enchanted ceiling above suddenly oppressive. He thought of Ginny's Patronus, now a heron, gliding silently over the Burrows pond, never speaking. Of Ron's boar, charging through the orchard with no purpose. Normal, expected, but his felt like a stranger wearing a familiar face. And Luna. She'd sent him an owl with trembling script. Star, they're not just changing, they're waking. Star. He placed the report on the counter. Then file this. And when something breaks through, when the veil trembles and the dead don't stay dead, remember, I was here. He turned and walked away, the clerk's voice trailing behind, already calling for the next in line. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. Harry lifted his wand, murmuring the incantation. The stag burst forth, silver light cutting through the gloom. It stood for a moment, still as stone. Then slowly, deliberately, it turned its head, not toward him, but west, toward the sea. And again, the whisper, faint but clear. Star, find her, before it finds you. Star. Rain tapped against the window pane of Grimmauld Place in uneven rhythms, like a message in code. Harry almost understood. He stood in the dim kitchen, a chipped mug of tea cooling between his palms, staring at the empty hearth. It had been weeks since the change, the night when every Patronus in the British Isles shimmered, twisted, and reformed into something new. Most called it a cosmic hiccup, a fluke of magical tides. Kingsley had sent a memo, calm and bureaucratic, no cause for alarm. But Harry had felt it then, something beneath the surface, a tremor in the air, like a breath held too long. His Patronus, once a steady silver stag, now flickered in unpredictable bursts, a form he couldn't quite name. Shifting, watching, he set the mug down and closed his eyes, trying to quiet the hum behind his temples. Lately sleep brought no rest. Dreams of veils fluttering in unseen winds, of voices calling from beyond stone archways. Luna had written him 3 days ago, her script looping and certain. Star, they're not just changing. They're trying to tell us something. Star, a cold draft snaked through the room, despite the sealed windows. Harry turned. There in the corner the air shimmered. Silver light pooled on the floorboards, rising like mist. It coiled, took shape. Not the stag. Not yet. Something slender, with long ears and a twitching nose. A hare. No, its eyes were too deep, too knowing. It turned its head, and for a heartbeat, Harry saw not an animal, but a face, familiar, blurred by moonlight. His breath caught, then a whisper. Star, Harry, Star. He froze. The voice was faint, layered, like wind through old parchment, like memory given sound. It wasn't coming from the creature's mouth. It came from everywhere. From inside him. Star, you must go. Star, go where? He asked, voice rough. The hare didn't answer. It turned and bounded, impossibly, through the solid door. Harry followed without thought, grabbing his cloak, his wand already in hand. The street outside was slick with rain, gas lamps flickering, like dying stars. No one was out. No owls. No cats. Even the city felt hushed, as if holding its breath. He walked, guided by instinct, by the pole behind his ribs, down narrow alleys, across wet cobblestones that reflected no light. The whisper came again, softer this time. Star. Not far now, Star. He crossed the Thames, the river black and silent beneath London Bridge. On the south bank, the air changed, thicker, older. Magic here wasn't woven into bricks and spells, but into soil and bone. He knew this place, not by memory, but by something deeper. The graveyard behind the ruins of an abandoned chapel, overgrown, forgotten. A place where names had worn off stones. The hare stood at the edge of a crumbling mausoleum, silver light, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Then it turned, and for the first time, it spoke with clarity. "Star, she is waiting." "Star." Harry's pulse spiked. "Who?" The hair didn't answer. It stepped forward, dissolving into mist that seeped through the cracked stone door. Harry pushed it open, the hinges screaming. Inside, the air was cold and still. Dust hung in the air like frozen breath, and there, on the floor, half buried under fallen rubble, lay a broken mirror, its surface not glass, but liquid silver. It rippled as he approached. Then, a voice, not from the hair, not from the mirror, but from the dark itself. "Star, you've been looking in the wrong places, Harry Potter. Star." It murmured, "Star, the dead are not gone, they are listening, and they are afraid. Star." He knelt, heart hammering. "Who are you?" The silver in the mirror rose, forming a face, feminine, pale, eyes wide with sorrow. "One of the first, Star." It whispered, "Star. And the last to remember what sleeps beneath the world. Your light knows, your heart knows, but you must see. You must believe." Star. Harry reached out. The moment his fingers touched the surface, the whisper became a chorus. Dozens of voices, hundreds, every Patronus that had ever been, all speaking at once. "Star, find her, before it wakes, before the veil tears. Star." And then, one voice clearer than the rest, soft as moonlight on water. "Star, find Luna. Star." The forest breathed in slow, deep pulses, its canopy shivering under a bruised twilight sky. Harry stepped over a gnarled root, his boots sinking slightly into the damp earth. The air clung to his skin, thick with the scent of moss and something sharper, ozone, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. Beside him Luna moved with an eerie quiet, her wand held low, its tip glowing a soft, unwavering blue. She didn't speak. She hadn't since they'd passed Hagrid's hut, and Harry had stopped asking. The note had come at dawn, sealed with the Ministry's crest, but written in Kingsley's hand. "Star, a thestral is missing. No tracks, no signs of struggle. Just gone. Star." And beneath it a single line, "Star. Your Patronus was seen near the edge of the forest last night. So was Lovegood's. Star." That was impossible. Harry hadn't conjured his Patronus in weeks. Yet when he checked the old stone basin in his study, the one enchanted to record traces of powerful magic, he found it shimmering with residual light. His stag had been there, and not alone. A hare, sleek and luminous, had danced beside it in the vision, their silvery forms intertwining before vanishing into the trees. Now, as they neared the clearing where the Strel had last been seen, the ground began to glisten, not with dew, but with something else, faint, opalescent streaks etched into the moss-like veins of moonlight. Harry knelt, brushing his fingers over the mark. It didn't fade. "It's star-pulse star. This isn't just residue," Luna murmured, her voice barely louder than the rustle of leaves. "It's a trail." Harry looked up. "You think the Patronuses did this? I think they're trying to show us something." She tilted her head as if listening to a sound only she could hear. "They're afraid." A cold ripple passed through him. Patronuses weren't sentient. They couldn't feel fear. And yet, his own had been restless lately, appearing unbidden, pacing the edges of his dreams. Last night he'd woken to find the room bathed in silver light, the stag standing at the foot of his bed, head lowered, as if in warning. Luna crouched beside the largest mark, her fingers tracing the shape. "It's not just the thestral. Something else was here. Something older." Harry frowned. "What do you mean?" "The forest remembers," she said simply, "and it's afraid too." A breeze stirred, sudden and sharp, carrying with it a whisper, not in words, but in sensation. A pressure behind the eyes, a flicker at the edge of vision. Harry turned, wand raised, but there was nothing. Only the trees, the deepening dusk, and the faint, ghostly after-image of antlers. His stag, flickering in the air for half a second before dissolving. Then Luna gasped. Harry spun. She was staring at the ground, her breath shallow. "Look." Where the silvery traces converged, the earth had cracked open, just slightly, revealing not soil, but but a smooth, glassy surface beneath, like dark mirror, and in its depths something moved, not a reflection. A shape, long-limbed, shadowed, watching. Harry's wand flared. Luna stepped back, but she didn't move. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. "It's not alone," she whispered. "There are more, behind the veil, and they're waking." The stag appeared then, not as a memory, not as magic, but as a living presence, its silver form solidifying between them and the fissure. It lowered its head, not in attack, but in protection. A moment later, the hair shimmered into being beside it, delicate but unyielding, and from the depths of the mirror, a single hand, pale, elongated, not quite human, reached up, pressing against the glass from below. Harry grabbed Luna's arm. Now, they ran, the forest folding around them like a closing fist, the silence behind them heavier than any sound. And all the way back to the castle, Harry could feel it, the weight of eyes no longer behind a veil, but almost here. The air in the Burrows' garden hung thick with the scent of damp earth and late-blooming lavender, the kind of quiet that only settles after a summer rain. Harry sat on the withered bench beneath the old willow, fingers absently tracing the rim of a chipped teacup. Across from him, Luna stirred her tea with deliberate calm, though her wide, silvery eyes were fixed on the horizon where the sun bled into twilight. Her Patronus, once a hare, now a luminous six-winged serpentine creature that coiled like mist around her shoulders, pulsed faintly, its glow dimming and flaring like a heartbeat out of rhythm. "It's whispering again," she said, voice soft but certain. Harry set his cup down. "What is?" "The veil, not the one in the ministry. Not exactly, but the space between, the thin places." She tilted her head, as if listening to something only she could hear. "It's trembling, Harry, like a curtain caught in a draught no one else feels." He exhaled slowly. Since the night when every Patronus in the world had flickered and changed, his own stag now bearing antlers like twisted roots, eyes too knowing, Luna had been the only one who didn't treat it as a passing oddity. While others joked about magical auroras or speculated on new moon cycles, she had spent nights tracing star charts with charred quills and humming half-remembered runes beneath her breath. And now, over the past 3 days, her Patronus had begun to speak, not in words, but in impressions. Cold stone, a low hum beneath the earth, a door that should not open. "I felt it too," Harry admitted. "In my dreams, like someone's calling my name from behind a wall." Luna nodded. "The hall of prophecy. Something beneath it is waking." He frowned. "The Department of Mysteries has layers of wards. If there were a breach, they wouldn't know. The magic there isn't meant to be understood. It's meant to be contained. And containment only works if you remember to check the locks." She stood, her bare feet silent on the grass. "The prophecies are restless. I heard them last night. Not voices, but echoes, like glass about to crack." Harry rubbed the scar on his forehead, faint but warm, as it often was when the past pressed too close. "You want to go back there?" "I need to. And you're the only one whose Patronus answers the same call." He looked up at her. The last light of day caught in her hair, turning it to spun moonlight. There was no fear in her gaze, only that quiet, unshakable certainty that had always unsettled and hankered him in equal measure. "I don't like that place," he said. "No, but it remembers you, and something there remembers you too." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl, and the soft rustle of Luna's Patronus winding through the air like smoke given shape. Then Harry stood, brushing dirt from his robes. "We go tonight, after midnight, when the wards are thinnest." Luna smiled, just slightly, just enough, and reached for his hand. Her fingers were cool, but her grip was firm. "It won't be kind to us whenever we find." "No," he agreed, "but it's calling. And I think we're supposed to answer." Above them, the first stars blinked awake, and somewhere deep beneath London, in a room no mortal was meant to enter, a veil, tattered, ancient, humming, with forgotten power, shivered like a breath held too long. The air in the Department of Mysteries was never still, but tonight it did more than shift, it pulsed. Harry stood before the veil, his breath shallow, fingers curled around the worn handle of his wand. The archway loomed like a wound in the world, its tattered black veil fluttering without a breeze. To anyone else it might have seemed unchanged since the last time he'd stood here, but he could feel it, the shift, the weight. It wasn't just memory echoing in the chamber. Something was listening. Luna stood beside him, barefoot on the cold stone, her silver blue eyes fixed on the veil as though she could see through its folds. Her Patronus, a hair once ethereal and silent, now hovered just behind her shoulder, its form flickering like candlelight in a draught. But it didn't move. It didn't vanish. It simply watched, ears twitching at sounds only it could hear. "It's afraid," Luna murmured, not turning her head. Harry glanced at her. "Afraid of what?" "Not of us," she said softly. "It's afraid for us." A hush fell, deeper than silence. Even the distant drip of water from a cracked pipe had ceased. The torches along the wall dimmed, their flames drawing inward, as if recoiling. Then from beyond the veil came a sound, faint, fragmented, like a whisper caught between syllables. Not a voice, not quite. More like the echo of one, stretched thin across time. Harry stepped forward. "Serious?" The word left his lips before he could stop it. He hadn't meant to say it aloud. But the chamber answered. The veil trembled. Not a flutter, a shudder, violent and sudden, as though something had struck it from the other side. The hair Patronus darted forward, placing itself between Harry and the arch. Its body glowed brighter, casting long, trembling shadows across the floor. Luna didn't flinch, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel, where she kept her wand, and the small carved raven she'd found in the ruins of an old wizarding outpost in the Highlands. "Don't," she said. "It's not him." "I know that," Harry whispered, though his heart hammered against his ribs. "Do ya?" Luna turned to him then, her gaze steady. "The veil doesn't return the dead, Harry. It consumes them. But something is coming back. Not a person, not a soul, something older." Her Patronus lifted its head, nose twitching, and then, impossibly, it spoke. Not in words, not in any language Harry had ever heard, but in a tone, a single pure note that resonated in his bones. It was a warning, a plea. He felt it in his chest before he heard it, his own Patronus stirring. A stag, bright and solid, erupted from his wand without him casting. It didn't charge, it didn't prance. It walked slowly to the base of the arch, lowered its head, and let out a low, mournful call that echoed through the chamber, like a lament. The veil rippled again. This time, a hand, translucent, skeletal, not of this world, reached through. Luna gasped. Harry raised his wand, but the stag stepped forward, placing itself between them and the arch. Its light flared, blinding white, and the hand withdrew with a sound like wind through dead leaves. "It's testing the boundary," Luna said, her voice calm, but edged with awe. "It's learning how to cross." Harry didn't take his eyes off the veil. "Why now? Why after all this time?" "Because they're afraid," she said. "The Patronuses. They've always been part of the light, yes, but also part of the threshold. They guard more than just us. They guard the edges of life. And now, something is wearing thin." Above them, the ceiling cracked. A single shard of obsidian stone fell, shattering at their feet. From the shadows along the walls, other shapes began to stir, faint glimmers, half-formed silhouettes. Patronuses, unsummoned, rising from places they shouldn't be. The chamber was awake, and it was not alone. The second moon rose not in silver but in pale gold, hanging low and heavy beside its cooler twin like a secret kept too long. Harry stood on the wind-swept hilltop near the old stone circle in Dartmoor, the damp grass crunching under his boots, as the air shimmered with something thick and charged, like the breath before thunder. His stag stood beside him, but it was no longer the familiar steady presence he'd known for years. Its form flickered, sometimes solid, bright, galloping through the mist, other times translucent, almost ghostly, its antlers branching into shapes that didn't belong to any earthly creature. Luna appeared beside him, barefoot as always, her pale dress fluttering despite the absence of wind. Her hair, once swift and silvery, now moved in slow, deliberate steps, its ears twitching not to sound but to silence. It tilted its head toward the golden moon, and for a moment Harry thought he heard a whisper, not with his ears, but in his bones. "They're remembering," Luna said, her voice soft but certain. "Not changing, remembering what they were before we gave them names. Harry exhaled slowly, watching his breath fog in the strange light. Mine feels older, like it's been waiting. It has, she replied. They all have. The veil between worlds is thin tonight, thinner than it's been in centuries. Below them, sparks began to rise from distant villages. Patronuses erupting from wands in surprise, fear, or wonder. Some flared brilliantly, wolves with eyes like molten rock, owls trailing constellations in their wake. Others sputtered and died, leaving their casters gasping, as if a part of them had been torn away. In Ottery St. Catchpole, Ginny's horse flickered and shrank into a small, trembling fox. Hermione's otter, usually playful, now coiled like a serpent through the air before vanishing altogether. It's not random, Harry murmured, watching the stag lower its head, not in challenge, but in reverence. They're responding to something. The moons, Luna said. They aren't just in the sky, they're inside us. The Patronus, it's not just protection. It's a memory of the soul's first light. And when the twin moons return, the old light wakes. A cold ripple passed through the air. The stag turned sharply, nostrils flaring at the edge of the tree line. There, shadows pooled unnaturally, too deep, too still. Harry drew his wand, but Luna placed a hand on his arm. Don't fight it, she whispered. Not yet. They're not here to harm, they're here to remind. From the darkness emerged, not a beast, but shapes, faint, shimmering echoes of Patronuses, that had once been, but twisted, frayed at the edges. A badger with no eyes, a falcon made of smoke. They drifted forward, not attacking, but circling the stone circle. Their movements synchronized, mournful. They're the forgotten ones, Luna said. Wizards and witches whose magic was lost, whose light was extinguished before it could be remembered. The moons are calling them home. Harry's chest tightened. Why no? Because something is coming back, she said. Something that was cast beyond the veil long ago. It remembers the light, too, and it wants to unmake it. The golden moon pulsed. A low hum filled the air, rising from the stones themselves. The stag stepped forward, and this time Harry didn't follow with his wand. He let it go. The stag bowed its head, and from its antlers bloomed a cascade of silver light. Not a spell, not a charm, but a song without sound. The hare joined it, leaping once, twice, and with each bound, strands of luminescence wove through the air, connecting the living Patronuses with the lost ones, binding them at a slow, ancient dance. Harry felt it then, not fear, but recognition, as if his heart had known this moment long before he'd lived it. Luna turned to him, her eyes reflecting both moons. We're not just chasing the truth, Harry. We're part of it. And high above, the two moons drew closer, their light merging into a single, blinding glow that washed over the hill, erasing shadows, awakening memories, and stitching the veil back together, thread by silver thread. The firelight in the corner of Xenophilius Lovegood's study flickered unevenly, casting long, wavering shadows across the stone walls lined with scrolls, star charts, and relics of forgotten lore. Dust motes spiraled lazily in the orange glow, disturbed only by the quiet turning of parchment. Luna sat cross-legged on the floor, her fingers tracing the grooves of a rune-inscribed slab, no larger than a dinner plate. It was made of a dark, pitted stone that seemed to drink in the light, and the symbols etched across its surface pulsed faintly, just enough to suggest they weren't entirely dormant. Harry stood behind her, arms folded, watching the Patronus that hovered near the ceiling. His stag no longer galloped through open fields in his mind's eye. It was different now, watchful, still, its translucent antlers brushing the ceiling, as if sensing something in the air. It hadn't spoken, not in words, but its presence had become insistent. It had led him to Luna's door 3 nights ago, nudging him forward when he hesitated on the porch. And now it stood guard. This language, Luna murmured, not looking up. It's older than Hogwarts, older than the Ministry. Some say it was spoken by the spirits before they took form. Harry stepped closer. Can you read it? Not all of it, but enough. She exhaled, her breath stirring the dust. It speaks of echoes, souls split not by death, but by purpose. A part of us, our truest part, sent ahead, not just to shield, but to remember. He frowned. You're saying a Patronus isn't just a spell? No, she said softly. It's a promise, a fragment of the soul given form to stand between us and oblivion. But when the veil trembles, she paused, her fingers pausing over a rune shaped like a spiral eye. They remember what we've forgotten. The stag shifted. A soft chime rang through the room, like glass brushing glass, and Harry felt it in his chest, a resonance deeper than sound. Luna didn't flinch. She tilted her head as if listening. "It's trying to tell us something," she whispered. Harry swallowed. "I felt it too, not just in my dreams. When I cast it now, it's like I'm not the one controlling it. Like it's guiding me." Luna finally looked at him, her pale eyes wide and unblinking in the dim light. "Then it's awakening, all of them. The phenomenon wasn't random. The stars aligned, just once, and something answered. On the other side of the veil something called, and our Patronuses, they recognized it. A cold draft slithered under the door. Though the windows were shut, the fire guttered. The stag lowered its head, antlers gleaming with an inner silver light, and stepped forward, not through the air, but through the surface of the runestone. For a heartbeat, it was embedded within the ancient rock, its form merging with the carvings. Then it emerged, smaller now, almost fragile, and drifted down to hover between them. From its mouth came not a sound but an image, projected in shimmering light above the stone, a vast crumbling archway veiled in mist. Beyond it shadows moved, tall, faceless figures with hands outstretched. Luna gasped, "The veil in the Department of Mysteries. But that's not all. Look." The image shifted. The archway was gone. In its place stood a circle of standing stones beneath a blood-red moon. Between them, silvery shapes, Patronuses of every form, stood in vigil, their heads bowed, and beneath their feet the earth pulsed with veins of glowing script, just like the runes on the slab. "This is a ward," she breathed. "A living ward. Not built of stone or spell alone, but of souls. Of star them star," she pointed at the Patronuses. "They weren't created to fight dementors. That's just what we use them for. They were meant to guard the threshold, to keep what's beyond from returning." Harry stared at his own Patronus, now resting on the floor like a living shadow. "And now they're changing because the war is failing." Luna nodded slowly. "Or because what's on the other side is waking up." Outside the wind rose. The trees bent, and far away beneath the earth and beyond time, something ancient exhaled. Rain tapped softly against the glass panes of the old apothecary-turned-library in Godric's Hollow, each droplet catching a flicker of candlelight like tiny stars falling sideways. The air inside was thick with the scent of aged parchment, dried herbs, and something fainter, something electric, like the moment before a storm breaks. Harry stood just inside the doorway, his fingers still curled around the handle of his wand, his breath slow. The air hummed. Luna stepped in beside him, her pale hair catching the dim light like moonlight on water. She didn't speak. She rarely did in moments like this, but her presence was steady, a quiet anchor in the growing unease. Her wand tip glowed faintly, a soft blue aura pulsing in rhythm with her breath. The room beyond was lined with shelves that reached into shadowed rafters, books stacked, haphazardly, some bound in leather, others in bark or scales. The long table dominated the center, where 4 figures in deep gray robes stood over a basin of silver liquid, their hands raised as if conducting a silent symphony. In the air above the basin, 7 Patronuses swirled: doe, raven, otter, fox, badger, hare, and a strange feathery creature Harry didn't recognize, each moving with eerie coordination, their forms flickering between solid light and near transparency. One of the scholars turned. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp, the color of storm clouds. "You felt it too," she said, not a question. Harry nodded. "Our Patronuses, they don't just change, they speak." The woman, Professor Alara Vex, according to the brass plaque on the table, exhaled slowly. "They've been doing it for weeks. Not words, not at first. Whispers, directions. One of ours, a Patronus in the shape of a heron, led a student into the Forbidden Forest 3 days ago. She returned with a stone tablet covered in runes no one has seen since the time of the Peverils." Luna stepped forward, her voice calm, dreamlike. "They're afraid." The scholars exchanged glances. One, younger, with ink-stained fingers, whispered, "Afraid of what?" "The veil," Luna said. "It's not just a doorway, it's a wound, and something is pressing against it from the other side." The air in the room grew colder. The Patronuses above the basin shifted, drawing closer together, forming a spiral. The doe, the one Harry knew so well, turned its head toward him. He felt it then, not in his ears but in his bones. A warning, low and resonant, like the toll of a bell, heard through water. Star, not all who sleep are gone. Star, Harry's breath caught. That's not my voice. No, Ilara said, it's not. But it is your magic, your soul's echo, only now it remembers more than it should. She moved to a shelf and pulled down a crumbling tome, bound in what looked like dragon hide. There are old texts, suppressed, mostly, that speak of a time when Patronuses were not just shields against dementors, but guardians of balance. They were linked, not just to individuals, but to the world's memory. When the veil first tore, centuries ago, they were the ones who sealed it. Luna reached into her coat and pulled out a small vial filled with swirling silver mist. Mine brought me this, from the edge of the sea at midnight. It smells like salt and lightning. The younger scholar took it gently, uncorked it, and poured a drop into the basin. The liquid flared white, and for a moment, the room filled with the sound of voices. Dozens, maybe hundreds, singing in a language that had no name. Harry closed his eyes. In the dark, behind his eyelids, he saw a shape, tall, shadow, with eyes like dying stars, reaching through a veil of mist. When he opened them, the Patronuses were all looking at him. And Luna, standing beside him, whispered, "They've chosen us, Harry. Not because we're strong, because we remember how to listen." Rain fell in silver sheets over Ottery St. Catchpole, the kind of downpour that made the earth smell like wet parchment and old stone. Harry stood beneath the crooked awning of a closed apothecary, his breath fogging in the chill, watching the alleyway ripple with shadows. His wand was in his hand, not by choice, but because something in his chest had tightened an hour ago, and pressure behind the ribs like a second heartbeat. His Patronus, usually a steady glow at the edge of his thoughts, had been restless all evening, flickering in and out of form like a candle in a draught. Then he heard it, a child's cry, sharp and sudden, cutting through the hush of rain. He moved before thinking, boots splashing through puddles that shimmered with unnatural hues. At the end of the alley, tucked between a collapsed fence and a moss-covered well, a small girl, no older than 6, was backed against the stone, her eyes wide, fingers clutching a broken toy broom. And crouched before her, low to the ground like a starved hound, was something that didn't belong. It had too many joints. Its skin was the color of spoiled milk, stretched taut over limbs that bent in ways no creature should. Its face, if it could be called that, was a smooth plane with only a slit for a mouth, opening and closing silently. Dementor-like, but not. This thing was older, hungrier. And it wasn't feeding on sorrow, it was hunting. Harry raised his wand, expecto patronum. The silver stag burst forth, bright, roaring, but didn't stop at his side. It charged, not toward Harry but straight at the creature, antlers lowered like a battering ram. The thing shrieked, a sound like glass breaking underwater, and twisted away, but the Patronus pursued, driving it back into the deeper dark. Harry froze. His Patronus had never done that before. It didn't wait for command. It didn't flicker and fade. It moved with intent, deliberate, focused, almost angry. The girl sobbed, clutching the broom to her chest. It whispered my name," she stammered. "It said I was lost." Harry crouched beside her, voice gentle. "You're not lost. You're safe now." But the air still hummed. The rain felt heavier, and through the veil of water he saw it, the stag, circling the creature, now pinned against the alley wall, its light pulsing like a living pulse. Then slowly the stag turned its head, not toward Harry, toward the girl, and Harry understood. He stood, heart pounding. "What's your name?" She looked up, trembling. "Minna." The Patronus dipped its head. Once, then surged forward. A single beam of light lanced from its antlers, striking the creature. It didn't scream this time. It unraveled, dissolving into threads of gray mist that were swallowed by the earth. Silence. The stag remained for a long moment, steam rising from its silver flanks. Then at last it turned to Harry, not as a manifestation of joy, but as something else. Something watching, waiting. It stepped forward, and for a breath Harry thought it would speak. Instead, it lowered its head, gently nudging his hand before fading into the air like breath on a winter morning. Harry exhaled, his fingers tingling. He pulled out the small cracked mirror from his pocket, the one Luna had given him weeks ago, the one that didn't reflect his face, but sometimes in the right light showed a silver hair leaping through mist. He whispered into it, voice barely louder than the rain. "Luna, I think they're not just protecting us anymore." A pause, then faint as if from deep underwater. "I know. They're choosing sides." The air in the forbidden forest tasted of iron and damp earth, thick enough to coat the back of Harry's throat. It wasn't just dark. No, it was a different kind of absence, as if the trees had swallowed the moonlight whole and forgotten how to give it back. He stepped carefully over a root that pulsed faintly, like a vein beneath bark, and glanced to his side. Luna walked with her head tilted slightly upward, her silver eyes reflecting nothing, yet seeing, he was certain, far more than he ever could. "Something's wrong with the edges," she said softly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade through smoke. "They're fraying," Harry frowned. "Edges?" "The edges of things, between what is and what might have been. The forest is thin here, it remembers too much." She reached out, fingers brushing a gnarled trunk. The bark shimmered for a heartbeat, just long enough to show the silhouette of a great winged serpent that dissolved into mist before Harry could be sure he'd seen it. A low hum vibrated through the ground, more felt than heard. Harry's wand was already in his hand, though he couldn't say when he'd drawn it. His Patronus, a stag, had not come when he'd tried to summon it at the forest's edge. Instead, a flicker, something long-limbed and horned, half-formed, had shimmered for a second before vanishing like breath on glass. Luna's had been worse. Hers had taken the shape of a radiant raven, yes, but its eyes had glowed with cold starlight, and when it spoke, it hadn't been in her voice. "Star, beware the hollow places. Star," it had said. "Star, they are calling. Star." Now as they moved deeper, the trees began to whisper, not in words, but in impressions, flashes of memory that weren't theirs, a battlefield under a bleeding sky, a woman with antlers singing into a void, a child crying in a language with no name. Then came the centaurs. They emerged from the mist like figures carved from storm clouds, tall, muscular, their eyes sharp with ancient knowledge. The Gorian stepped forward, his bow half raised, nostrils flaring. "You should not be here, Harry Potter," he said, his voice deep and gravelly. "The stars are unraveling. The forest dreams of things that never were, and yet they walk." Luna turned to him, calm as still water. "The Patronuses changed for a reason. They're not just protectors anymore. They're messengers." The Gorian's gaze flicked to her. "You speak of the silver ones that flicker at the edge of sight, the ones that weep light and speak in backwards tongues. We've seen them. They pass through the veil between moments. They are not of this world." Harry swallowed. "What do they want?" "A warning," said another centaur. Ferenze, stepping forward. His blue eyes held sorrow. "Something stirs beyond the veil, not death, not life. A hunger that remembers warmth. It reaches through the cracks in time, pulling at the roots of magic itself. The creatures you see now, shadows with too many legs, birds with no wings, they are echoes of what it wishes to become." A rustle came from the undergrowth. Not wind, not animal. Something stepped forward, tall, emaciated, with too many joints in its limbs. Its face was smooth, featureless, yet it wept silver tears that sizzled where they touched the moss. It made no sound. It simply pointed, one long translucent finger, toward the heart of the forest. Luna inhaled sharply. It remembers being alive. Harry's hand found hers without thinking. Her fingers were cold, but they curled around his with quiet strength. "That's not possible," he whispered. "Everything is possible," Luna said, "when memory becomes more real than flesh." Above them, the canopy shifted. Stars blinked in and out of existence, rearranging into unfamiliar constellations. One formed a shape Harry knew too well, the stag, but distorted, its antlers branching into hands, its mouth open in a silent scream. And from the depths of the forest, a sound rose, not a roar, not a cry, but the slow, hollow breath of something waking up. They had come seeking answers, but the forest had already begun to answer. The air in the burrow's kitchen was thick, with the scent of burnt toast and damp wool, the kind of heaviness that clung to autumn mornings like a second skin. Harry stood by the window, his breath fogging the glass as he watched the faint silver ripple drift past the garden fence. It had been the 7th Patronus that week, this one a shimmering hare, its ears twitching, pausing just long enough to glance back at him before vanishing into the mist. They were everywhere now, not just his own stag, which had begun pacing the edges of his dreams, but others, dozens, scattered across the country. Muggle news stations had begun reporting strange lights in the sky, silvery shapes over Stonehenge, a flock of otters darting above the River Tyne, a great horned owl circling the ruins of Whitchurch. At first the ministry dismissed it as mass hysteria, a side effect of the recent lunar alignment. But Harry knew better. He'd seen the way his Patronus had hesitated the night before, pawing at the ground near the hearth, its antlers pointing, deliberately, southwest. Luna arrived just after dawn, her boots leaving damp prints on the floorboards. She carried a satchel slung over one shoulder, and in her hand a small glass vial filled with swirling light. "It followed me from Ottery St. Catchpole," she said, as if commenting on the weather. "A kingfisher. It kept diving toward the river, then back to me. I think it wanted me to see something." Harry turned, frowning. "My stag's been doing the same, not just here. Everywhere I go, it's leading me." Luna smiled, soft and knowing. "They're mapping. Mapping what?" She uncorked the vial. The light inside pulsed, then spilled out in a thin thread, curling through the air like ink in water. It arced toward the war, where it began to draw, not randomly, but with intent. Lines formed, curves intersected, clusters of glowing dots bloomed like stars. Harry stepped closer, heart pounding. It was a map, not of roads or towns, but of something older. Sites marked with symbols he didn't recognize. A spiral within a circle, a tree with roots shaped like hands, a crescent moon pierced by a wand. "These are the old places," Luna whispered, "the ones the founders spoke of in riddles, the ones the veil remembers." Harry reached out, fingers brushing the light. A jolt ran up his arm, and for a moment he wasn't in the burrow. He was standing on a wind-swept cliff, the sea roaring below, and the sky was split by a jagged tear, something dark and formless pressing against the other side. Then it was gone. "They're not just showing us where to go," he said slowly. "They're afraid." Outside, a new shape emerged from the mist, a badger, low to the ground, moving with purpose. Then a fox, a heron. One by one, Patronuses appeared, not as random wanderers, but as markers, each taking position on the glowing map, as if claiming their place in a design long forgotten. Luna touched his arm. Her fingers were cold. "They've chosen us, Harry, not because we're strong, but because we're listening." He looked at her, really looked. There were shadows under her eyes, but also a kind of quiet fire. A certainty that had nothing to do with logic, and everything to do with belief. And in that moment he understood. This wasn't about prophecy. It wasn't about destiny written in dusty tomes. It was about trust. About following light into darkness, not because you knew the way, but because something inside you refused to look away. The map shimmered, then solidified. 12 sites, 12 keys. And at the center, Avalon, the Isle of Glass, where the first magic had woken, and where the first silence had begun. "We leave today," Harry said. Luna nodded. "And we don't look back." The wind across the lake was sharp with the scent of wet stone and cold iron, slicing through Harry's robes like a whispered warning. Luna walked ahead, bare feet silent on the slick black stones that ringled the water's edge, her blonde hair lifting in silver wisps around her face. She didn't shiver, didn't falter, even as the mist thickened and curled into shapes that looked too much like watching eyes. "Do you hear it?" she asked, her voice soft, but carrying across the stillness. Harry frowned. "Hear what?" "Not with your ears," she said, turning to him with that distant calm in her wide, pale eyes. "With your Patronus." He reached instinctively for his wand, but it wasn't the Dementors he feared now. It was the silver stag that had been flickering at the edge of his dreams, appearing unbidden in quiet moments, not galloping, not charging, but standing, watching, as if waiting. And sometimes, when no one was looking, it would turn its head toward him and breathe words in a voice that wasn't sound. "Star, she knows the way." "Star, she?" Harry asked aloud, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to Luna or the stag. "The lake remembers," Luna said, stepping into the shallows. The water didn't ripple. It absorbed her foot like ink soaking into parchment, and the guardian beneath it only speaks to those who've lost something and still carry it with them. Harry hesitated. "You mean grief." "I mean memory," she corrected. "Not all ghosts are dead, Harry. Some live in the shape of a thought, in the weight of a name." He followed, the cold rising up his legs like chains. The water was unnaturally still, pressing against him as though the lake itself resisted intrusion. Then, beneath the surface, something stirred. A low hum began, not in the air, but in the bones. The stones beneath their feet vibrated, and the mist coiled tighter, forming spirals that pulsed with faint blue light. From the center of the lake the water rose, not in a wave, but in a column, twisting like a spine made of liquid glass, and within it a figure took shape. Tall, androgynous, clad in robes of woven reeds in frozen moonlight, its face was a shifting mosaic of expressions: sorrow, wisdom, fury, peace, each flickering like candle flames. Its eyes were voids, but they saw. "Why do you come?" asked, and its voice was many. Children laughing, a mother weeping, a sword ringing on stone. Luna stepped forward. "We seek the truth behind the changing light." "The light does not change," the guardian replied. "It remembers, and memory is not fixed. It bends, it breathes, its star chooses star." Harry felt his Patronus stir beneath his ribs, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Our Patronuses, they're not just charms anymore, are they?" The guardian tilted its head. "They were never just star charms. They are fragments of soul given form. When the veil trembled, something ancient awoke, something that had been sleeping in the space between breaths." "What is it?" Harry asked. "The force that lives in forgetting," the guardian said. "The silence after a name is unspoken, the hollow where love used to be. It is returning, and it hungers for what is brightest." Luna lifted her hand. Her Patronus, a hair of silver mist, emerged from her chest and hovered beside her, nose twitching as if catching a scent. "It's already begun. The creatures are restless. The old wards are fraying. The balance is tipping," the guardian said. "For every memory restored, one is stolen. For every light kindled, a shadow grows longer. You carry something rare, 2 Patronuses that remember star each other. Star, that is why they speak. That is why they guide." Harry looked at Luna. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something deeper: recognition. "You two were not brought together by accident," the guardian whispered. "You are the bridge, one who has walked through death and returned, one who has always seen what others cannot. Together, you remember what the world has forgotten." "And if we fail?" Harry asked. The lake darkened, the column of water trembled. "Then the light will forget itself, and the world will speak only in echoes." The air in the forbidden forest tasted of damp earth, and something sharper, like burnt wire and old sorrow. Harry pulled his cloak tighter, the hem snagging on a thorned vine as he stepped over a gnarled root. Luna walked beside him, barefoot despite the frost, her silver eyes reflecting the pale glow of the mist that coiled between the trees. Her Patronus, a hair made of shimmering light, trotted just ahead, ears twitching, pausing every few steps, as if listening to a sound only it could hear. Harry's stag stood silent at his side, head lowered, antlers casting long shadows across the forest floor. It hadn't spoken, not in words, but its presence had grown heavier these past days, like a hand pressing between his shoulder blades, urging him forward. "It's close," Luna murmured, not turning. "Can you feel it, like a whisper behind your ribs?" Harry exhaled, watching his breath curl into the cold. "I feel it, but I don't know what star its star is." The stag lifted its head. Its muzzle twitched. Then, without warning, it stepped ahead, deliberate, urgent, and the hare mirrored it, both creatures moving in unison toward a clearing thick with standing stones, half swallowed by moss and ivy. The stones were older than Hogwarts, older than memory. Harry had never seen them before, though he'd walked these woods 100 times. And then the mist shifted. Something moved within it. Not an animal, not a person. A shape, tall, hunched, stitched together from shadow and fragments of light, like a memory torn apart and clumsily reassembled. Its limbs were too long, fingers dragging like roots across the ground. Where a face should have been, there was only a hollow, pulsing faintly with a sickly green glow. Harry drew his wand. "Luna, I see it," she said softly, not with fear, but with recognition. "It remembers pain, not its own, someone else's." The creature shuddered. A sound followed, not a voice, but a chorus of whispers, overlapping, broken, names, dates, places. Harry caught fragments: Star, Dumbledore, the tower, the curse, the boy who fell, Star. "No," Harry breathed. "That's not possible." "It's not him," Luna said, stepping forward. "It's the memory, twisted, hungry." The stag moved between her and the thing, antlers lowered. The hair circled it slowly, light brushing the edges of the shadow. Where it touched, the creature flinched, hissing like steam on stone. "They're made of lost things," Luna said, "memories that never found peace. But something's feeding them, pulling them back." Another shape emerged from the mist, this one smaller, curled like a child, but with too many joints, limbs folding in unnatural ways. It wept silently, black tears dripping into the moss, which withered where they fell. Harry's throat tightened. He saw Sirius in that darkness. Cedric, his parents. All the faces that haunted the edges of his dreams. "We can't let them stay like this," he said. "No," Luna agreed. "They're not meant to be stars seen star. They're meant to be remembered. Gently. Not dragged out like this." The stag pawed the ground. Then slowly it stepped toward the first creature. Light spread from its hooves, thin silver threads creeping across the earth. The air followed, weaving around the shapes, leaving trails of soft radiance. The shadows recoiled, but not in anger. In confusion. In longing. One reached out, trembling. The stag met its hand with its muzzle. A pulse of light exploded, not blinding, but deep, resonant, like the chime of a bell beneath the earth. The creatures shuddered, their forms flickering, unraveling. The green glow in their hollow faces dimmed. For a moment, just a sliver of humanity returned. A boy's face, a woman's eyes, a man's voice whispering, "Star, thank you, Star." Then they were gone. Only silence remained. Harry lowered his wand, chest heaving. "They were never attacking us." "No," Luna said. "They were calling for help." Above, the clouds parted. The moon shone down on the stones, and for the first time in years, Harry felt it. Something ancient waking, not in anger but in sorrow. And the Patronuses, now quiet, stood guard, as if they'd always known this would come. Rain lashed against the windows of the leaky cauldron, each drop cracking like a whisper against the enchanted glass. Inside, the air was thick with damp wool and unease. A knot of witches huddled near the hearth, their voices low, their wands clenched in trembling fingers. One, a young healer from St. Mungo's, tried again, incantation firm, memory bright. Expecto Patronum. Nothing. Not a wisp, not a spark. She lowered her wand, face pale as parchment. Harry stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching. His own stag had flickered to life that morning. Strong, swift. But then paused mid-gallop, as if listening to a sound no one else could hear. It turned its head toward the south, antlers lifting, before dissolving into silver mist. He hadn't mentioned it. Not yet. Luna arrived just after 7, her radish earrings swinging gently beneath the tangle of moonlit hair. She didn't shake off the rain. It slid from her cloak like oil from glass, as though the water itself hesitated to touch her. "They're not gone," she said, stepping toward Harry. "They're just hiding." "Hiding?" Harry asked. "Or being taken?" She tilted her head, eyes distant. "My hair didn't come this morning, but I felt it, deep in the roots of my teeth, like it was calling from underground." He frowned. "You felt it." She nodded. "Like a hum beneath the earth, like the world is off-key." Outside, a gust howled down Charing Cross Road, rattling the sign above the pub. Inside, the healer raised her voice. "It's not just me, 3 others at St. Mungo's, no Patronus at all, not even mist. And one of them tried the charm during a Dementor drill. Nothing, they had to evacuate the ward." A burly wizard with a grizzled beard slammed his fist on the bar. "This started after that light in the sky," purple streaking the clouds like veins. Saw it from my window in Ottery. Same night my otter vanished. It wasn't just your otter, Luna murmured. It was everyone's. But only some are losing the magic. The rest, their Patronuses changed. Or moved. Or woke up. Harry looked at her. You think it's connected? The ones who can still summon them, and the ones who can't. I think the Patronuses are choosing, she said simply. A hush fell over the room. Even the fire seemed to pause. Then from the back a woman in ministry robes spoke up. That's absurd. They're charms. Spells. They don't choose star. Luna. Luna turned slowly. And yet mine only appears now, when I'm mere standing stones, or rivers that run backward at dawn. And it doesn't run beside me any more. It walks ahead like a guide. Harry remembered his stag turning south. A patron near the door muttered, I can't even feel the memory I used. Like it's been smoothed over. Like someone took a cloth to my happiest moment and wiped it clean. Luna's eyes softened. They're not losing the memory. They're losing the starlight star. That memory feeds on. Something is dimming the source. Then what do we do? The healer asked, voice cracking. Harry stepped forward. We find where the light's going. And if it's not light anymore? Luna asked, her voice barely above a breath. What if it's becoming something else? No one answered. Outside the rain slowed. The street lamps flickered, not with magic, but with strain, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Then, from somewhere deep beneath Diagon Alley, beneath centuries of spellwork and buried wards, a sound rose, low, resonant, like a single note played on a bone flute. The kind of sound that makes your ribs ache. Harry and Luna exchanged a glance. It's not just missing, she said. It's calling. He nodded. And we're the only ones listening. The air above the great hall shimmered, like heat rising from stone, thick with silver light. Dozens of Patronuses drifted, pulsed, circled, some galloping, others gliding, a few simply hovering like watchful sentinels. The usual warmth of the hall was replaced by a hush that hummed, charged with something older than spells, older than memory. Harry stood at the head of the long rows of tables, his chest tight, his breath shallow. Beside him, Luna breathed softly, eyes wide and unblinking, her fingers curled around the edge of her wand as though anchoring herself to the world. They're waiting, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For what? Harry asked, though he already knew. He could feel it in the way his stag bent its head towards Luna's hair, close, almost touching, yet never quite making contact. Their forms flickered, not with weakness, but with purpose, like candle flames leaning into a shared draught. A low chime rang, not from any bell, but from the Patronuses themselves. One by one they stilled. The stag turned its antlered head. The hare tilted its long ears. Then, in unison, every creature shifted, not toward Harry, not toward Luna, but toward the center of the hall, where the space above the stone floor began to ripple. Harry stepped forward, hand out. Wait. Luna caught his wrist. Don't interrupt. They're speaking. Speaking? He looked at her, startled. Patronuses don't speak. They didn't, she said. Until now. The silvery light coalesced. Shapes formed. Not a single form, but a shifting mosaic of fragments. A fox, a heron, a badger, a falcon, each appearing for a heartbeat before dissolving into the next. Then came the voice, not loud, not booming, but layered, as if 100 whispers had learned to sing in harmony. Star, we are the keepers of what was loved. We are the light before the veil. We were born of joy, but now we remember sorrow. Star, Harry's breath caught. His own Patronus lowered its head, and for the first time he didn't feel pride or comfort in its presence. He felt responsibility. Star, something stirs. Star, the voices continued. Star, where no light has walked for centuries. The veil is thin, not torn, but breathing. And it dreams of crossing. Star, Luna, stepped forward, her voice steady. What dreams? A pause. The silver forms pulsed. Star. The forgotten. The cast out. The ones who fed on silence before magic had names. They wait in the space between heartbeats. They remember what was lost, and they know your names. Star. Harry felt the words like a cold hand on his spine. Why us? Why now? Star. Because you listen. Star. The stag turned fully to face him. Star. Because two lights, born of different sorrows, now burn as one signal. The bond between you, it is not coincidence. It is a bridge, and bridges can be crossed, or broken. Star a ripple passed through the gathered witches and wizards. Some gasped, others clutched their wands tighter. The young woman near the back sobbed quietly as her otter-shaped Patronus curled around her legs like a comforter. Luna lifted her chin. What do you want from us, Star? Remember, Star. The voices said, Star, seek the places where magic first learned to hide, the standing stones, the deep wells, the roots beneath the world. There the guardians sleep, and only together, light joined to light. Can you wake them? Star, the mosaic of forms began to fade, dissolving back into individual shapes. The stag and the hare turned to each other once more, then slowly touched foreheads. A pulse of light exploded outward, not blinding, but deep, resonant, like a bell struck beneath the earth. When it faded, the Patronuses remained, but silent now, ordinary again, or almost. Harry looked at Luna. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her mouth curved into a small, determined smile. They finally told us, she said. Now we have to listen. He nodded, heart heavy and full. Then we started dawn. The air in Luna Lovegood's bedroom at the Burrow was thick with the scent of dried moomcalf bones and crushed dreamroot, the only thing she'd found that kept the nightmares at bay, though tonight they had failed. She awoke not with a start, but with a slow, sinking awareness, as if she were descending through layers of water. Her fingers twitched against the quilt, but her body refused to move. She was caught between sleep and waking, and the veil, real or imagined, was thin. Before her, the far wall shimmered like heat over stone, then dissolved into mist. She saw the archway, the ancient crumbling stone arch from the Department of Mysteries, its tattered black veil fluttering as if stirred by a wind from another world. But it was not still as she remembered. Cracks spiderweb across its surface, glowing faintly with a cold silver light. Each fissure pulsed like a heartbeat. And from within, voices. Not words, not quite, but emotions pressed into sound. Grief, longing, a terrible hunger for return. A whisper brushed against her ear, so close it might have been breath. Star, she walks among stars, but the door is cracked. Star Luna tried to speak, to ask who, but her voice wouldn't come. Instead, her eyes were drawn to the veil itself. Shapes flickered behind it. Silhouettes of people, hands pressed against the fabric from the other side, fingers trembling. Some reached, others curled inward, as if cradling something unseen. One face, pale and translucent, turned toward her. She didn't recognize the features, but the eyes, wide and silver, were like her own. A cold wind swept through the room, though the window was closed. Her curtains billowed, and the dream charm she'd hung above her bed, tiny glass orbs filled with powdered opal and stardust, began to hum. The sound deepened, resonating in her bones, until it formed a single clear note. Then the Patronus came. Not hers, not Harry's. Something else. A hair of pure light but fractured, its form flickering, dissolving and reforming, as if struggling to hold shape. It stepped forward on the floor that was no longer wood, but stone, ancient and veined with cracks that glowed like the ones on the arch. The hair turned its head and looked at her. In its eyes she saw not reflection, but memory. Harry standing before the same arch, years ago, shouting a name into the dark. And then, new images. A forest of petrified trees beneath a blood-red moon, a river of whispers winding through a valley of stone hands, and a crown of antlers made of frozen light, buried beneath snow. The hair opened its mouth, not to speak, but to release a stream of light that coiled into symbols in the air. Old runes, forgotten. Luna didn't know them, but her blood did. She felt them in her pulse, in the back of her throat, like a song half-remembered. Star, it dreams. Star, the voice came again. Layered now with many others, Star, and the dream is waking. Star, the cracks in the veil widened. A hand, solid now, not shadow, pushed through. It wore a ring, Luna recognized. A serpent coiled around a moonstone. Her mother's ring. She gasped, and the world snapped back. She was in her bed. The room was still. The dream charms hung silent. Moonlight painted silver bars across the floor. But in the center of the room, where the vision had been, lay a single white feather, soft, impossibly bright, and warm to the touch. As she reached for it, it dissolved into mist that curled around her wrist like a bracelet of smoke. Outside, an owl hooted once, then silence. Luma sat up slowly, her breath unsteady. She looked at her window where frost had begun to form, despite the summer night, and saw, just for a moment, the shape of antlers etched into the glass. She whispered into the dark, "It's not just the Patronuses, is it? It's the dead who are trying to speak." The air in the ministry's lowest archive level tasted of dust and forgotten time, thick enough to coat the back of Harry's throat as he stepped carefully over a warped floorboard. His wand trembled slightly in his grip, the tip glowing with a soft, steady lumos that reflected dully off the rows of crumbling scrolls and cracked glass orbs lining the shelves. Beside him, Luna moved like a wisp through the shadows, her bare feet silent on the stone, her own Patronus, a silvery hair, padding beside her with ears twitched forward, alert. "It's here," she whispered, her voice like wind through reeds. "I can feel it breathing." Harry frowned. "Prophecies don't breathe, Luna. Not anymore," she said, turning her pale eyes toward him. "But this one used to, before it was buried." They had come down through a forgotten service stair behind the Department of Mysteries, a narrow spiral that wound beneath even the veil chamber. The map they'd found in an old copy of Star the Quibbler Star, dated 50 years prior, written in a cipher only Luna could decipher, had led them here, to a vault marked only with a sigil. Two stags intertwined with willow branches, their antlers forming a crown of light. Harry's stag, Patronus, emerged slowly from his wand, not as a burst of light, but like a creature rising from sleep. It stepped forward on hooves that made no sound, its head low, nostrils flaring, as if scenting danger. It didn't look at Harry. It looked past him, toward a cracked stone pedestal at the center of the chamber. "There," Luna said. The pedestal held a single, unbroken orb, smaller than the others in the Hall of Prophecy, its surface clouded, not with mist, but with something darker. Veins of shadow pulsed beneath the glass, retreating as the stag approached. The hare followed, and together they circled the pedestal, their light casting long, trembling shadows on the walls. Harry reached out, but Luna caught his wrist. "Not with your hand," she said, "with your memory." He hesitated. "What memory?" "The one it remembers, not you." He closed his eyes. Images flickered, his mother's laughter, the glow of his father's glasses, the cold rush of a Dementor's breath. But then another moment surfaced, the night in the Forbidden Forest, when he walked willingly to Voldemort, when his wand had lit with not just Star Expecto Star, but Star Surrender Star, but Star Surrender Star. When death had felt like coming home, he whispered, "I'm ready." The orb cracked, not with sound, but with silence, a sudden absence of breath, of heartbeat. Then from within, a voice, not a recording, not a memory. Something older, carked, not with sound. But the silence absences Sard, the white remembers its sword, and the guardians wake from sleep, the veil shall tremble. For the Patronus was not born of joy, but of war. We forged them from the last breaths of the fallen, from the final thoughts of those who chose to stand. They were never shields, they were soldiers. And when the dark returns not as shadow, but as hunger, they will rise, not to protect, but to reclaim. Star Harry staggered back. The voice didn't stop. It layered, multiplied, dozens of voices, then hundreds, all speaking in unison, ancient and weird. We gave them our names, our memories, our unfinished love. And when the battle was done, they lingered. They waited. And now they know the enemy has returned, not from beyond the veil, from within it. And it is waking. Star Luna sank to her knees, her hands pressed to the stone. They were never just charms, she breathed. They were souls. Harry's stag turned to him, and for the first time he saw recognition in its eyes, not of him, but as if it knew him from another life. It lowered its head gently and touched its horn to Harry's chest. A flash, battlefields, of silver light, warriors made of memory and flame, standing in ranks before a crumbling archway. The veil wasn't a veil at all, it was a door. And something on the other side had been knocking for centuries. The orb shattered, the voices ceased, and in the silence, both Patronuses stood guard, facing the dark. The black wake was never truly black. On still nights, it reflected the star-choked sky like a sheet of polished obsidian, but beneath its surface lay something older, something that breathed in slow, tectonic rhythms. Harry adjusted the gillyweed between his teeth, the rubbery strands already beginning to take effect, as bubbles tickled his ankles. Beside him, Luna floated with her eyes closed, her silver hair drifting like kelp in the current. Her Patronus, a hare with eyes like moonstones, hovered just above the water's surface, pulsing faintly, as if counting seconds. "Are you ready?" Harry asked, though he knew she could barely hear him now, the water thickening around his voice. Luna opened her eyes. They were wide, unafraid, and full of something Harry had seen only in dreams: recognition. She nodded, took his hand, and together they slipped beneath the surface. The cold hit like a curse, sharp and immediate, but the gillyweed worked fast. Gills flared along his neck, his limbs grew fluid, and the silence of the deep wrapped around him like a cloak. Moonlight filtered down in fractured beams, illuminating schools of silver fish that scattered at their passing. The giant squid watched from a distance, one enormous eye blinking slowly before it retreated into the silt. They swam deeper, drawn by the pull in their chests, not fear, but a resonance, a hum in the marrow. Harry's own Patronus, the stag, had not appeared since the change. Instead, a spiral of light now coiled around his heart, visible only to him and Luna. It pulsed stronger the closer they got to the lakebed, and then they saw it. Carved into the stone floor, radiating outward in concentric circles, were runes, ancient, glowing faintly blue, their shapes unlike anything in modern magical script. Some resembled serpent spines, others looked like stars caught mid-collapse. The water trembled around them, not from current, but from the runes themselves, vibrating as if singing a song too low for human ears. Luna reached out, her fingers hovering just above the nearest symbol. The moment she did, the spiral of light in Harry's chest flared, and a voice, not spoken, not heard, but star felt star, echoed through the water. "Star, you were expected." Star Harry jerked back. Luna didn't flinch. Her lips moved, forming silent words. She was star answering star. He grabbed her wrist, shook his head. He turned to her, her eyes full of sorrow and certainty. Then she pressed her palm flat against the rune. The lake erupted, not with sound, but with light. The runes blazed, flooding the depths with a cold silver radiance that pushed the darkness back like a tide. A vision seared into Harry's mind. A woman with antlers made of starlight, standing at the edge of a crumbling world. A door of bone and mist, opening slowly. Children with eyes like voids, whispering in unison. And beneath it all, a heartbeat. Slow, steady, vast, rising from the earth itself. The spiral in his chest uncoiled, stretching like a living thread toward Luna. Their Patronuses, hers a hare, his now a shapeless light, merged above them, forming a single pulsing sigil in the water. And then, as quickly as it began, the light dimmed. The runes faded, the visions dissolved. They floated, suspended, breathless in more ways than one. Luna turned to him. Water carried her voice in broken fragments. "They were never just protectors," she said. "They're memories, the memories of magic." Harry swallowed, gills fluttering. "And this place? A wound," she whispered. "Sealed, but not closed." Above them, the surface shimmered, distant and thin. The stars had shifted. Somewhere a clock was ticking down. He took her hand again. They had seen only the threshold, but the lake had shown them enough. The real journey was just beginning. The auroras began on a Tuesday, though no one noticed at first. They shimmered like rippling silk in the upper reaches of the night sky, faint at first, pearlescent veils shifting across the stars. In Godric's Hollow, Harry woke to the sound of glass trembling in the window frame. a low hum vibrating through the floorboards. He sat up, wand already in hand, heart thudding against his ribs. Outside, the air shimmered with silver, a soft glow pulsing over the rooftops like breath. He stepped onto the porch barefoot, the dew cold beneath his toes. His wand tip ignited, star, Lumos star, but the light sputtered, as if starved. Then, from the mist, emerged a silver stag, solid and radiant, its antlers scraping the low-hanging clouds. It didn't look at him. Instead it reared, hooves striking at nothing that Harry could see, yet the air crackled. A sound like tearing parchment split the silence, and the stag charged, vanishing into the trees. By dawn, reports flooded the ministry. Patronuses appearing unbidden, acting aggressively, fighting invisible forces in Diagon Alley, in Hogsmeade, along the cliffs of the Isle of Wight. A shopkeeper swore his honor. Patronus had dragged him from his bed, leading him into the street before attacking a patch of empty air with such ferocity it dissolved into mist. Trembling, Harry stood in the ministry atrium, watching a silver heron dive through the enchanted ceiling, wings flaring as it collided with a distortion in the air, a ripple like heat over stone. The bird shrieked, a sound not of magic but of something alive, wounded, and then vanished. "They're not just changing," a voice said behind him. Soft, certain. "They're defending." He turned. Luna Lovegood stood, wrapped in a long sea-green cloak, her wand tucked behind her ear like a pen. Her eyes, wide and storm-gray, scanned the atrium's high arches. "They've always been more than shields," she said. "They're memories, yes, but also echoes." "But echoes can remember things we've forgotten," Harry frowned. "You're saying they're fighting something we can't see?" Luna tilted her head, as if listening to a distant melody. "They've been trying to tell us, for weeks. Mine hasn't taken form in days. It just hums, like a wire pulled too tight." A chill prickled his neck. His own Patronus had felt different, restless, insistent. The night before it had appeared in the kitchen, nudging his hand toward the Marauder's map, then flickering toward the drawing of the veil in the Department of Mysteries. "They're not just reacting," he said slowly. "They're guiding." Luna nodded. "And whatever is coming, it's not from this world." That evening, they apparated to the edge of the forbidden forest, where the auroras were strongest. The sky pulsed overhead, waves of silver light cascading like water down an invisible slope. Around them, figures flickered, dozens of Patronuses, some familiar, some strange. A badger, a kestrel, a great silver serpent, each lashing out at the air, jaws snapping, talons raking. And then silence. The forest stilled. Even the wind died. Harry felt it first, a pressure behind his eyes, a whisper beneath his thoughts. Not words, not quite. A feeling. Star, danger, close. "Star," Luna gasped. Her wand slipped from behind her ear, clattering to the moss. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. He did, a low chant, wordless and ancient, rising from the earth itself. The silver stag appeared beside him, but it was different now, smaller, trembling. It looked at him, and for a heartbeat, Harry saw not an animal, but a face, his mother's eyes, wide with warning. Then the ground cracked. A fissure split the forest floor, and from it poured a darkness that swallowed light. The Patronuses charged. The stag led them, a cryless charge into the void. Harry reached for his wand. Luna gripped his arm. "They're not fighting to win," she said, voice breaking. "They're fighting to delay." Above, the auroras flared one final time, blinding, desperate, before winking out. And in the sudden dark, something breathed. Rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the windowpane of Harry's study, the kind of soft, steady drizzle that made the world feel muffled, distant. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long, flickering shadows across shelves lined with old tomes and relics from battles long past. He sat at his desk, quill in hand, reviewing a report from the Department of Mysteries, something about anomalous readings near the Vale. But his thoughts kept drifting to the Patronus that had come 2 nights ago. It wasn't his. It had slithered through the edge of the garden like mist, given form, silver and silent, a serpent coiled in moonlight. Not a stag, not anything he'd ever seen. And yet it had looked at him, eyes too, knowing, too alive, and whispered a single phrase before dissolving into the air. Star, she remembers you. Star, the words had lodged themselves in his chest like a splinter, sharp and persistent. A knock at the door startled him. Not the front door. This was the small one leading from the garden. He rose, wand drawn, heart thudding once, twice. No one used that entrance. No one knew Star about that entrance. He opened it. There, on the threshold, lay a letter. It was old, not aged by time, but by Star plays Star. The parchment was damp, faintly green-tinged, as though pulled from water or grown from moss. The seal was wax the color of bone, pressed with a mark he hadn't seen in 20 years. The stylized eye of a thestral, unblinking. His breath caught. He closed the door behind him, knelt, and picked it up. The moment his fingers touched it, the air grew colder. Not the chill of rain or season, but the deep, marrow-freezing cold of something Star, unwelcome Star. A faint shimmer passed over the paper, like ripples on a pond, and then silence, complete. As if sound itself had been swallowed. He broke the seal. Inside, the handwriting was not ink, but light, silver script that hovered above the parchment, trembling white breath on glass. Star Harry, Star, the voice in his head, was not his own. It was soft, familiar, achingly so. Star, if you're reading this, I found a way to reach you. Don't trust the silence. The veil isn't empty. It's listening. Star. He knew that voice. Serious? He whispered. The letters shifted, rearranged. Star. Not him, not anymore. But I wear his voice so you'll believe me. So you'll listen. There are things moving where the dead walk, Harry. Things that were never meant to wake. The Patronuses. They aren't changing. They're remembering. Star. Harry's fingers tightened on the letter. Outside, the rain had stopped. Too sudden, too complete. Star. She's tried to get through. Luna's Patronus sees her. Yours will too if you let it. Don't close your eyes to the silver. Don't turn away when it speaks. They're not just echoes. They're warnings. Star. A gust of wind rattled the window. The fire in the hearth flared once, blew for an instant, then died. Star. The veil is thinning, and she's not the only one calling. Star. The light in the script dimmed, flickered. Star. You must go to the moor, where the old stone stands beneath the hawthorn. She'll meet you there. Together you'll see what we cannot say. Star. Then one final line, smaller, trembling. Star. I miss the sun. Do you still see it? Star. The parchment darkened. The glow faded. The words were gone. Harry sat back on his heels, the letter trembling in his hands. The cold lingered. His breath came in white puffs, though the room should have been warm. He looked down at the empty page, and then, slowly, he reached for his coat. Somewhere in the back of his mind, beneath the shock, the grief, the disbelief, something stirred. A whisper in the dark. Not his voice, but something else. Something silver. The wind carried the scent of frost and damp earth, as Harry stood at the edge of Hogsmeade, his breath curling in pale wisps beneath the swollen moon. Luna stood beside him, her silver eyes reflecting the cold light, her wand steady in her hand. The air was too still, unnaturally so. Even the usual rustle of nocturnal creatures had gone silent, as if the village itself were holding its breath. Then, a scream. It tore through the quiet like a blade, sharp and sudden, coming from the direction of the 3 broomsticks. Harry turned, heart slamming against his ribs, and broke into a sprint, Luna gliding beside him, with that uncanny quiet grace she always possessed. Windows flickered to life in the waking village, curtains drawn back in alarm, but no one stepped outside. They knew better than to face whatever was coming. The street widened near the apothecary, and there it stood, a creature neither beast nor ghost, but something twisted from both. It loomed on hind legs like a starved wolf, yet its limbs elongated and bent at impossible angles, ending in fingers too long and too many. Its face was a blurred impression of human features, shifting like smoke over bone, and where eyes should have been, 2 hollow pits pulsed with a sickly green light. A low guttural sound vibrated from its chest, not quite a growl, not quite a word, something older. Harry raised his wand, expecto patronum. The silver stag burst forward, radiant and strong, but then hesitated. It didn't charge. Instead, it turned its noble head toward Harry, and for a heartbeat he saw something in its eyes. Recognition. Warning. Then Luna's otter emerged, swift and playful as ever, except this time it didn't dart ahead. It looped around Luna once, and stood on its hind legs, front paws lifted as if in signal. "They're not fighting," Luna murmured, her voice calm but edged with wonder. "They're waiting. For what?" "For us to follow." The creature shrieked, a sound that cracked the cobblestones beneath its feet, and lunged toward a shuttered bakery. Harry acted on instinct, casting a shield charm that flared gold in the moonlight, deflecting the creature's swipe. It recoiled, hissing, and for a moment the green light in its eye pits flickered, revealing, just for a second, a flash of silver, a shape, a memory, a Patronus, trapped. "It's not attacking," Harry realized aloud. "It's lost." Luna stepped forward, wand lowered. "It's not corrupted. It's being consumed." The stag moved then, not toward the creature, but beside Harry, nudging his shoulder gently with its spectral nose. Luna's otter did the same to her, then darted forward, not at the beast, but toward the earth. It pawed at the ground, insistent. Harry understood. "It wants us to open the earth. The veil between worlds is thin here," Luna said, already tracing a sigil in the air with her wand. Under the moon, on ancient stone, together they cast not a spell of force, but of revelation. A soft silver light spilled from their wands, intertwining like ribbons, sinking into the ground. The cobblestones shimmered, then dissolved into mist, revealing a circular pattern carved in stone beneath runes old enough to predate Hogwarts. The creature howled, but this time in pain, not rage. Its form wavered, and for a fleeting moment, a woman's face surfaced within the smoke, her mouth open in a silent plea. Luna whispered. She was a seer. I can see her memories in the air. They bound her soul here to guard the rift. But something is pulling her through. The Patronuses moved as one, encircling the creature, their light forming a cage of silver flame. The green glow in its eyes dimmed. The air trembled. Harry took Luna's hand without thinking. "We close it now." Their voices rose together, ancient words tumbling from their lips, as if remembered from a dream. The ground sealed. The creature collapsed into mist, the woman's face dissolving with a sigh of gratitude. Silence returned. The moon watched, impassive. Luna turned to Harry, her fingers still in his. "They knew," she said softly. "Our Patronuses. They've always known what we're meant to do." And high above, unseen, a silver stag and a silver otter lingered for a breath longer in the night sky, before vanishing like stars at dawn. The rain fell in silver sheets over the moors, each drop catching the pale glow of the half-moon like tiny shards of forgotten dreams. Harry stood at the edge of a crumbling stone circle, the wind tugging at his cloak, his breath forming mist in the cold. Beside him, Luna watched the sky with that quiet intensity that always made him feel as though she was seeing something just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Her wand was in her hand, not raised, but alive with a soft, pulsing light that mirrored the rhythm of her breath. "It's closer now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Harry nodded. He didn't need to ask what she meant. For days, the Patronuses had been restless, his stag no longer merely appearing when summoned, but stepping forward uninvited, its eyes too, knowing, its movements deliberate. Luna's hair, usually swift and fleeting, had begun to linger, ears twitching at sounds only it could hear. And tonight, for the first time, they had both appeared together, without a spell, emerging from their wands like echoes given form. Then something changed. The stag lowered its head, not in challenge, but in reverence. The hare stepped forward, unafraid, and touched its nose to the stag's muzzle. A ripple passed through the air, a sound like distant chimes, like wind through ancient trees. Harry gasped. A warmth spread through his chest, sudden and deep, as if a door long locked had creaked open. Images flashed behind his eyes. A child's laughter, in a sunlit garden. Luna, younger than he'd ever seen her, spinning in a yellow dress. Her mother beside her, humming a lullaby in a language Harry didn't know, but somehow understood. The song curled around him like smoke, sweet and sorrowful. Then another vision, his own voice, young and desperate, shouting star, Expecto Patronum, star in the dark corridor of a train, the Dementors closing in. But this time, he wasn't alone. A hare darted past his feet, small and fast, and the stag that burst forth was brighter, stronger, as if fed by an unseen source. Harry staggered, gripping his wand tighter. "Luna, what's happening?" Her eyes were closed, tears tracing quiet paths down her cheeks. "They've always known each other," she whispered. "They've been waiting for us to catch up." Another wave of warmth, and the memories deepened. He saw her standing by the Black Lake after the Battle of Hogwarts, whispering to the wind, asking if the dead could hear the living, and he saw himself years later, standing at his parents' grave, wishing for a sign, any sign, that love didn't end with breath. And then, a new image, the two of them, not as they were now, but as they might have been, standing side by side in a ruined temple beneath the stars, hands clasped, their Patronuses merging into a single radiant beast, part stag, part hare, part something older than either. "It's not just protection," Luna murmured, opening her eyes. They shimmered with unshed light. "It's remembrance, it's connection. They're not just charms, Harry. They're pieces of us, of everyone who's ever loved, who's ever hoped." He looked at her, really looked. The rain had soaked her hair, clinging to her pale cheeks, but she was smiling, a small sure thing, like a secret shared with the universe. And in that moment he felt it, not just the bond between their magic, but something deeper, a thread woven through time and loss and longing, pulling them together not by chance, but by something older than fate. The stag and the hare stood side by side now, their light mingling, casting long shadows that danced like living things across the stones. The wind stilled, the rain slowed, and somewhere far beneath the earth, something ancient stirred, awakened not by power, but by the quiet, undeniable force of two hearts remembering what they were meant to be. Rain laced the moors in silver threads, drumming a quiet rhythm against the hood of Harry's cloak as he stepped over the moss-slick stones. The air smelled of wet earth and something older, damp bone perhaps, or the breath of forgotten spells. Luna walked beside him, her bare feet silent on the slick grass, unbothered by the cold. Her Patronus, a silvery hair, flickered at her shoulder like a candle in a draught. It didn't dart ahead as it once had. Now it lingered, watching as if guarding her from behind. "This is the place," Luna said, her voice soft but certain. "The Scholar of Bones lives beneath the standing stones. He calls them his teeth." Harry frowned. "His teeth? He says the earth chews on time," she replied, "and he's learned to listen." Before them, a ring of weathered stones loomed out of the mist, crooked and cracked like the ribs of some long-dead beast. In the center a hollow had been carved into the ground, a stairway spiraling down into darkness. No torches lit the descent. Only a faint greenish glow pulsed from below, rhythmic as a heartbeat. Harry's stag Patronus stepped forward, lowering its head, not in challenge, but in warning. The antlers brushed the air, and for a moment Harry swore he heard a whisper, not in his ears, but in his bones. "Star, wait. Listen." Star Luna tilted her head, as if hearing it too. "It knows he's down there," she murmured. They descended. The air grew thick, close, redolent of chalk and old parchment. The walls were lined with shelves carved from stone, stacked with skulls, some human, some not, each marked with tiny runes. In the center of the chamber sat a man, hunched over a desk made of fused vertebrae. His hair was long and white as bone dust, his eyes milky with cataracts, yet they lifted instantly as they entered. "You're late," the scholar said. "The hounds of the Vale have been sniffing at the edges for weeks." Luna smiled faintly. "Time bends mere old graves." The man chuckled, a dry rasp like pages turning. "Ah, the girl who speaks to echoes, and the boy who survived death twice." His gaze settled on Harry. "Your stag doesn't just protect you, does it? Its star remembers star." Harry hesitated. Stunned. Strange things. Since the shift. "It acts like it's trying to tell me something." "Because it is," the scholar said, rising. He moved with a limp, each step echoing unnaturally in the chamber. "You think Patronuses are just spells, charms conjured from happy memories. But they're not. They are star-ensouled fragments. Star, pieces of us that chose to stay behind when we first cast them. They grow, they learn, and when the veil thins, they remember what we forget. He reached into a skull on the shelf and pulled out a scroll bound in what looked like sinew. Long ago, the first wizards didn't summon Patronuses. They bargained star with them. Each time you cast the charm, a piece of your soul steps forward, volunteers, to stand between you and the dark. Most never return. They fade, but some persist. They gather memory, purpose. Luna's hair flickered, then stepped forward, nose twitching at the scroll. The scholar went very still. It recognizes the sigil, he whispered. That's impossible. This writing hasn't been seen in 12 centuries. What does it say? Harry asked. The binding, the scholar replied. A pact made between the first guardians and the living light. It speaks of a time when the Patronuses would rise not to repel dementors, but to seal the breach, when the lost would call from beyond the veil, and only the willing fragments of the living could answer. Harry's stag moved to his side, pressing its spectral shoulder against his leg. Warmth spread through him, sudden and deep, not joy, but resolve. They're not just protecting us, Luna said, wonder in her voice. They're preparing, the scholar nodded slowly. And you two, you're the only ones they've chosen to guide. Why do you think that is? A silence settled, heavy with implication. Then from the walls the skulls began to hum, low, mournful, like wind through cracks in stone. The green light dimmed. The stag raised its head, antlers gleaming. The hair turned, ears flat. Something was coming, not from the stairs, from star within star the walls. The air in Godric's hollow tasted of frost and old stone, even in late spring. Harry stood before his parents' grave, breath curling in pale wisps, the tip of his wand alight with a soft star, Lumos star. The night was too still. The Nowl tolled. No wind stirred the hedges. Even the village lights across the valley seemed dimmer, as if watching. Then his Patronus came, unbidden, unsummoned. It burst from his wand like a startled animal, a silver stag erupting into being with a snort that echoed unnaturally loud. But it didn't prance. It didn't bow its head or circle him in quiet loyalty. It stomped, ears flat, muscles coiled and turned, staring not at Harry, but at the sky. Harry lowered his wand, heart thudding. What is it? The stag flicked an ear, then bolted, not toward the village, but into the forest beyond the graveyard, vanishing between the trees like a streak of moonlight. He ran after it. Branches slapped his face, roots snagged his boots, but he didn't stop. The stag wove through the dark with impossible speed, yet always just in sight, as if leading him. Then it halted at the edge of a clearing where the earth dipped into a shallow basin of moss and standing stones half swallowed by ivy. The stag turned, eyes glowing like twin lanterns, and for a breath, no more, it looked almost pleading. Then it reared and screamed. The sound wasn't of this world. It tore through the air like glass cracking under pressure, sharp and wrong, and the stars above flickered. Not dimmed, star flickered star, as though reality itself had blinked. Harry staggered back. From the center of the clearing, the ground exhaled. A ripple passed through the moss, then the stones groaned, shifting in their ancient beds. A coldness rose, not from the earth, but from star beneath star, riff, rain-jawed, seeping upward like ink in water. Harry's breath caught. His scar didn't burn. Its star itched star, a low, persistent throb behind his left eye. And then a whisper, not in his ears, in his star-mind star. A voice like stone scraping stone, syllables half-formed, half-forgotten. He couldn't understand it, only feel it. Hunger, and memory, and something older than magic. A silver hair darted into the clearing. It moved like liquid starlight, ears twitching, nose quivering. It paused beside him, then looked up, directly into his eyes. Recognition flared. Luna? Harry breathed. The hair didn't respond. Instead it hopped forward and pressed its nose to the moss where the coldness was strongest. Instantly the silver form shuddered. Its light dimmed. A low chime like a broken bell rang in the air. Then another whisper. This one clearer. Star. It remembers you. Star. Harry spun. No one was there, but the hare turned its head sharply, toward the veil. In the Ministry's Department of Mysteries, deep beneath London, a tattered black curtain stirred. Not from wind, not from breath, from star pole star. The enchanted wards on the archway cracked, just once, like ice splitting on a frozen lake, and the air around it turned the color of old bruises. Somewhere in Ottery St. Catchpole, a radish-shaped earring began to hum, and in a quiet cottage by the sea, Luna Lovegood opened her eyes. She hadn't been asleep, she had been star elsewhere star, somewhere between dreams and memory, where voices spoke in riddles and shadows wore familiar faces. She sat up slowly, bare feet touching cold wood, her wand lay on the nightstand, pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat. Outside, the moon hung low and wrong, too close, too pale, its craters shifting when she wasn't looking. "It's awake," she whispered. And from her wand, the hare emerged once more, not as a charm, not as magic, but as a guardian stepping back into the world. The air in the Department of Mysteries tasted of rust and ozone, thick with the residue of magic gone wrong. Harry stood at the edge of the dais, wand clenched in his hand, breath shallow. The archway, cracked now like a shattered mirror, pulsed with a sickly violet light. Threads of shadow writhed through the veil, thin as spider silk, but cold enough to make his teeth ache. Luna stood beside him, barefoot despite the chill, her silver eyes reflecting the chaos beyond the torn fabric of the world. "They're coming," she whispered, her voice barely louder than the wind that shouldn't have been there. Harry didn't ask who. He could feel them, the pull of hollow spaces, the whisper of names long forgotten, the weight of eyes that had never blinked. His Patronus, a stag that had once been steady and sure, now flickered at the edge of the room like a candle in a storm. It didn't charge, it watched, and waited. Luna's Patronus, a hare of molten silver, darted in tight circles around her feet, its ears twitching toward the arch. Then, without warning, it leapt, not at the veil, but at the ceiling. A moment later, dozens of other Patronuses followed, pouring from cracks in the stone, sliding down walls like liquid light. Not just theirs. These were foreign, some familiar, others strange. A fox with 3 tails, a bird made of starlight, a serpent that coiled through the air without sound. "They're answering," Luna said, wonder threading through her fear. "They've been waiting." A low moan rose from the veil, then split into a chorus of screams, voices from both sides, living and dead, tangled in grief and rage. The shadows thickened. Shapes began to emerge, tall, gaunt things with too many joints, their faces smooth and blank. Dementors, but not. These were older, hungrier. They moved like smoke, given purpose. Harry raised his wand. "Expecto Patronum." The stag surged forward, but instead of charging, it lowered its antlers, and star pushed star, not against the shadow creatures, but against the tier itself. The other Patronuses followed, forming a living barrier, a wall of light that hummed with ancient power. The air shivered. Sparks of silver rained down like dying stars. "They're trying to seal it," Luna breathed. "But it's not enough." She stepped forward, arms outstretched. Harry grabbed her wrist. "Luna, no. They're not just protecting us," she said, turning to him. "They're protecting Star themselves, Star. The veil isn't veil. The veil isn't just a door, it's a wound. And if it stays open, everything, light, memory, love, will bleed out." Her hand found his, fingers interlacing. Cold, steady, around them, the Patronuses pulsed in unison, their light syncing with the rhythm of their joined breath. Harry felt it then, a pull deeper than magic, older than time. Not just a bond of Patronuses, but something woven between Star, them Star, threads of memory and quiet glances and words spoken in candlelight, now tightening into something unbreakable. The stag turned its head toward him. Its eyes, bright, knowing, held his for a heartbeat. Then it charged, not at the shadows, but star into star the tier. Luna's hair followed. They didn't scream, they didn't falter. They poured themselves into the rift, silver light flooding the violet cracks, sealing, mending, star, sacrificing star. Harry fell to his knees. Harry fell to his nest. Harry fell to his nice, just grief, but the echo of 1,000 lost voices finally at peace. The archway shuddered. The shadows shrieked as they were dragged back, unraveling, like thread pulled from cloth. And then, silence. The veil hung whole once more, not restored, not fixed, but closed. Luna sagged beside him, her breathing ragged. "They're gone," she whispered. Harry closed his eyes. In the dark behind his lids he saw it, a single silver thread, still glowing, stretching from his heart to hers. "They're not gone," he said. "They're waiting." And somewhere, deep in the quiet between heartbeats, something answered. Rain tapped steadily against the windowpane of Harry's small sitting room at Grimold Place, a soft rhythm that usually soothed him. Tonight, it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting long, wavering shadows across the worn rug, and the air smelled faintly of old parchment and damp stone. He sat on the edge of the sofa, wand in hand, staring at the silvery shape that hovered before him, its form shifting, unstable, like mist caught in a slow current. It had been weeks since his Patronus first changed. Once a proud, galloping stag, it now flickered between forms. Sometimes a stag, yes, but then a phoenix, a hare, even a faint silhouette of a woman with long hair, her back turned. He had tried to dismiss it. Everyone had changes, but his felt different. It didn't just look different. It felt alive in a way it never had before, as if it were listening, remembering. "Show me," he whispered, voice rough. "If you're trying to tell me something, show me," the Patronus shivered. Then, slowly, it coalesced, not into an animal, but into a figure, tall, with round glasses and a kind, crooked smile. James Potter. Harry's breath caught. He hadn't seen that face so clearly in years, not without a photograph. And then another form emerged beside him, a woman with bright green eyes, her hair falling in gentle waves. "Lily." "No," Harry said, standing. "That's not possible." But they were there. Not solid, not real, but present, in a way that made the room feel smaller, charged with something ancient and tender. The Patronus didn't just show them. It held them, as if their memories weren't just Harry's, but part of the magic itself. And then came others. Sirius stepped forward, grinning, youthful and reckless, one hand ruffling his hair. Remus appeared beside him, calmer, his eyes warm with quiet pride. "Tonks," her hair shifting from bubblegum pink to deep violet as she laughed at something Sirius said. Even Fred, just for a moment, a flash of red hair and mischievous glint, before he faded like smoke. Harry dropped to his knees. His chest ached, not with pain, but with a weight so profound it threatened to crush him. Each face, each smile, each echo of a voice he could almost hear. It wasn't just memory. It was star-presence, as if the love he carried, the grief he had buried, had been woven into the very essence of his magic. "Is that what you are?" he asked, voice breaking. "All of them? Still here?" The Patronus didn't answer. It couldn't. And yet it leaned toward him, a gentle nudge of light against his shoulder. Lily's hand, perhaps, if she could have touched him. He remembered what Luna had said weeks ago, her voice soft but certain. "Patronuses don't just reflect joy. They carry what we can't let go of. Maybe they've always been more than we thought." At the time he'd thought it was just Luna being Luna, poetic, strange, beautiful in her oddness. But now he understood. The astronomical event hadn't star-changed, the Patronuses. It had star-awakened them. And his was a guardian not just of hope, but of every soul he'd loved and lost. A single tear slipped down his cheek. The light of the Patronus caught it, turning it into something silver, something sacred. "I miss you," he whispered to the figures. To the magic, to the pieces of them that remained. Every day, and for the first time the stag returned. Not alone, but walking beside a woman with green eyes, a man with glasses, a dog with a lopsided grin. Together they stood before him, not as ghosts, but as protectors, as family. The fire cracked, the rain slowed, and Harry, at last, felt less alone. The air in the hollows was thick with the scent of damp moss, and something older, something metallic, like rusted iron buried deep beneath the roots of the ancient yew trees. Luna stood barefoot on the moss-covered stone, the cold seeping into her bones, her breath forming small clouds in the moonlight. Around her the forest was silent. No owl called, no rustle of fox or hare in the underbrush. Even the wind had stilled, holding its breath. Her Patronus, the silvery hair, twitched beside her, ears pricked, eyes reflecting not moonlight, but something deeper. It had led her here through the winding paths of the Welsh woods, whispering in soft, wordless pulses that resonated in her chest like a second heartbeat. Harry had tried to stop her. "It's a trap," he'd said, his own stag pacing behind him with restless energy. The veil doesn't give second chances, but Luna had felt the pull too strongly. The dreams had come every night since the last eclipse. Fragments of voices, half-remembered faces, a child's laughter swallowed by the dark, and always the hair, nudging her toward this place, this moment. Before her, set into the base of the largest yew, was the hollow, the stone archway they had found in the ruins beneath an old druidic cairn. It wasn't the Department of Mystery's veil. This was older, wilder. Its edges shimmered like heat off stone, and the veil within wasn't black, but shifting. Silver one moment, deep violet the next, threaded with veins of light that pulsed like a dying star. "You don't have to do this," Harry had said, gripping her arm. "We can find another way." But there was no other way. She had seen it in the stars, felt it in the tremors beneath the earth. The balance was breaking. Patronuses weren't meant to speak, they weren't meant to choose, and yet hers had chosen her, again and again, leading her to places no spell could reach. Now, the hair stepped forward, pressing its nose against the shimmering surface. A ripple spread outward, and the voices began. Not words, not quite, but feelings, grief, longing, a plea, and beneath it all, a warning. "Star, she is waking. She remembers your name." Star Luna closed her eyes. Her mother's face flashed behind her eyelids, smiling, then screaming, then gone. The hollow had taken her, and now it called back. The hair turned to her, its light dimming. "I know," she whispered. "You want me to cross, but if I do, you might not come back." The hair blinked once. Then, slowly it bowed its head. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but her hands were steady as she reached into her robes and pulled out the small silver locket, the one inscribed with runes no one had been able to translate. Until now, until she had dreamed them. She opened it. Inside was not a photo, but a sliver of light, her first memory of her mother, preserved in magic. A memory the hollow had stolen. "If I go in," she murmured, "and I bring her back, will you fade?" The hair did not move, but the air grew warmer. A single note, like a silver bell, rang through the clearing. She smiled, fragile as moonlight on water. Then, "I'll just have to make sure I come back with you." She stepped forward. The moment her foot crossed the threshold, the world fractured. She felt herself pulled in every direction at once, her bones dissolving, her thoughts scattering like leaves. The hair surged beside her, a streak of light in the chaos, anchoring her. Voices rose, hundreds of them, lost, forgotten, screaming. And at the center, one voice, soft but certain. "Luna, you were always the one who could see." She reached out, not with her hands, but with her heart. And the hair, burning brighter than ever, leapt into the dark with her. The air in the hollowed ruin of Car Dethel was thick with the scent of damp stone and something older, like burnt parchment and frost on forgotten graves. Moonlight bled through the cracked dome above, painting fractured silver across the moss-eaten pillars that spiraled inward toward a sunken dais. Harry stepped carefully, his breath curling in pale wisps before him, the cold here deeper than winter. Beside him, Luna moved in silence, her eyes wide and unblinking, fixed on the center of the chamber where shadows pooled unnaturally dense. Their Patronuses had led them here. Harry's stag no longer just a shape of light, but pacing at his side like a living guardian, antlers brushing the ancient carvings on the walls. Luna's hair flickered with an iridescent sheen, ears twitching at sounds only it could hear, nudging her forward with soft, urgent prods against her hand. Then the shadows breathed. They rose like smoke given weight and will, coalescing into a figure, tall as the pillars, draped in tattered robes woven from starlight and ash. Its face was neither young nor old, but shifting, now a woman with eyes like storm clouds, now an old man with antlers of bone, now something not human at all. The air hummed, not with magic as they knew it, but with the resonance of time unspooling. "You have come," it said, and the voice was many voices layered, whined through reeds, the crackle of fire, the distant toll of the sunken bell. "You who carry the last embers of a dying covenant." Harry's hand twitched toward his wand, but Luna gently laid her fingers over his wrist. "They're not threats," she whispered. "They're memory." The being tilted its head. "Memory. Yes, I am what remains of the first wardens, the keepers of the veil, the watchers between life and what lies beyond. I remember when the Patronus was not a charm, but a covenant. The gift from the light-bearers to those who promised to guard hope." Harry swallowed. "And now the light falters." The figure extended a hand, and the stag and hare stepped forward, bowing their heads. "Your souls still burn with enough truth to summon them. But the world beyond these stones, it forgets, it mocks. It uses your magic like a toy while darkness gathers at the edges of things unseen." Luna stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Not all have forgotten. We've seen the signs. The beasts restless, the skies weeping silver, the whispers in the mirrors. And our Patronuses, they speak. Not in words, but in purpose." The being's form flickered, and for a moment its eyes were twin voids. Purpose, yes. They do not protect only from dementors. They protect from the hollowing, the slow unmaking of souls. But they are fading, because belief is thin, because hope is ration like coin. Harry felt the stag press against his leg, warm and solid. "Then tell us what to do." "Prove," the Guardian said. "Prove that humanity still deserves the light, not through strength, not through conquest, but through sacrifice, through love that does not demand return, through courage that walks into the dark without a wand." Luna reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a small vial filled with swirling silver, her last memory of her mother, preserved. "I offer this," she said, "not because it's easy, but because holding on too tightly has kept me from seeing what's ahead." Harry closed his eyes. He thought of Jenny, of Teddy, of the laughter in grim old place, and then he thought of the first time he'd cast a Patronus, on the lake, saving himself. "I offer," he said, "the lie that I've always been the one who needed saving." The chamber trembled. Their Patronuses stepped forward, merging in a burst of radiant mist that swirled around the Guardian. Light poured into the cracks of the dais, and beneath their feet runes awoke, glowing gold, then blue, then white. The being exhaled, and the sound was like mountains sighing. "You have passed the trial, not because you gave up your past, but because you gave it freely." And from the heart of the dais, something ancient and nameless began to rise. Rain mashed against the cracked stones of the old watchtower. Perched on the edge of Dovedale, its shadow stretched long and trembling in the dim glow of Luna's Patronus. It hovered beside her, not the usual hare, but a creature of shifting silver light, neither fully formed nor still, more like a constellation given breath. It pulsed faintly, as if in time with something beneath the earth. Harry stood at the tower's broken arch, his own Patronus, a stag, once solid and proud, now elongated, its edges fraying into smoke. It didn't move. It simply watched the valley below, where the mist had begun to coil unnaturally, rising in columns like twisted pillars of breath. There were whispers in it, not words, not quite, but sounds like memories trying to speak. "They're not attacking," Harry said, voice low. "They're waiting." Luna stepped beside him, barefoot on the cold stone, her hair clinging to her cheeks with rain. "They're not creatures," she murmured. "They're echoes." A silence settled between them, broken only by the creak of ancient wood and the distant cry of a nightjar, one that didn't belong to this season. The silver light from their Patronuses flickered, then bent inward, drawn to the center of the tower floor. There, in the worn circle of a forgotten ritual, the air thickened. A shape formed, not solid, not ghostly, but somewhere in between. It wore the tattered robes of a wizard, its face blurred, as though seen through rippling water. It did not speak with a mouth, but with the resonance of a struck bell. "Star, we were forgotten." "Star." Harry stepped back, hand instinctively reaching for his wand. Luna placed her fingers gently on his wrist. "We were not dark." "Star," the figure continued. "Star, But we had no light, no joy to call upon, no Patronus to shield us when the veil thinned. Star. Another form emerged, this one smaller, trembling. Then another, dozens. They rose from the earth, from the stones, from the very air, each one a fragment of a soul that had slipped through the cracks of death without protection. Luna's breath caught. They died without ever knowing happiness, she whispered. Or they forgot it, and when the veil trembles the absence pulls them back, not as ghosts, but as hunger. Harry remembered the Dementors, the way they fed on joy, left only emptiness. But this was different. These weren't predators, they were the unguarded, the ones who died too young, too broken, too alone to summon a Patronus. And now, something beyond the veil was calling them. The stag turned its head, slowly, and pressed its spectral muzzle against Harry's chest, not in comfort, in warning. "They're not trying to harm us," Harry said. "They're drawn to our Patronuses, not to feed, to remember." One of the figures reached out. Its hand passed through the silver hair, and for a moment its form brightened, its face clearing. A young woman with kind eyes and a scar across her temple. She looked at Luna and smiled faintly before dissolving into mist. "They're being pulled," Luna said. "Something is opening beyond the veil, and it's taking what it can find, souls without light, memories without anchors." Harry closed his eyes. He saw Sirius falling through the arch. He saw his parents' faces in the graveyard. He saw the countless unnamed dead of 2 wars, buried in unmarked earth. "What if the Patronuses aren't just protectors?" he said. "What if they're shepherds?" Luna's Patronus, the shifting, star-like hair, lifted its head. It wasn't just light. It was memory. It was love, preserved. And it was trying to guide these lost ones home before the dark pulled them under. A low hum rose from the earth. The mist began to writhe. From the depths of the valley, shadows peeled themselves from the trees, taller than men, with hollow eyes and mouths that opened into nothing. But this time, Harry didn't raise his wand. He stepped forward, and his stag moved with him, not in defense, but in invitation. The air tasted of cold iron and old magic, thick enough to coat the tongue. Harry stood at the edge of the hollow, boots sinking slightly into the frostbitten earth. Before him, the ground split open like a wood, revealing the veil. No longer the tattered archway of the Department of Mysteries, but a living thing pulsing with a rhythm that matched the erratic beat of his heart. Its fabric shimmered, not with the usual ghostly whispers, but with voices, hundreds, thousands, speaking in tongues long lost, pleading, warning, screaming. Silver light spilled from his wand, not as a spell, but as a stream of pure Patronus energy, coiling around his arm like a serpent made of moonlight. It pulsed in time with the silver hair beside him, Luna's Patronus, its long ears twitching, its eyes fixed on the veil. "They're afraid," Luna said, her voice soft but steady. She stood just beside him, barefoot in the snow, her breath rising in pale clouds. Their eyes, wide and silver-lit, reflected the shifting veil as if she could see through it. "The Patronuses, they're not just warning us. They're holding something back." Harry didn't answer. He could feel it, the pressure building behind the veil, a presence vast and ancient, neither dead nor alive, neither ghost nor god. It had been sleeping in the spaces between worlds, fed by forgotten grief and untended sorrow. And now, drawn by the shifted stars, the unraveling of old wards, it was waking. A low groan echoed from the arch, and the silver light flickered. From the darkness beyond, shadows began to seep, not mere absence of light, but something thicker, hungrier. They slithered across the ground like oil, rising into shapes that mimicked the living, twisted versions of friends long gone, of voices he'd thought buried. Sirius with hollow eyes, his mother, her mouth open in a silent scream. He clenched his jaw. "Don't look," he whispered. "It's not real, but it's real to you," Luna said, stepping forward. Her Patronus darted ahead, a streak of light that sliced through one of the shadow figures like a blade. It shrieked, a sound that tore at the edges of hearing, and dissolved into mist. That's how it feeds. On memory, on love turned to pain. More Patronuses arrived then, not summoned by wands, but by will, by need. A silver otter spiraled through the air, then a majestic stag, a soaring eagle, a badger, a fox. Witches and wizards had come, from Hogwarts, from Hogsmeade, from hidden enclaves across the land, drawn by the pull in their chests, the sudden clarity in their Patronuses' eyes. They formed a ring around the hollow, their lights merging into a lattice of silver that arched over the veil like a dome. But the shadow pressed harder. Harry felt it in his bones. The weight of inevitability. This was not a fight of spells or strength. It was a choice. The Patronuses were not just protectors. They were memories given form, love made manifest. And love, Luna had told him once, was the only thing that could stand between the living and the hunger of the void. He looked at her then, really looked. Her hair, pale as moonlight, stirred in a wind that wasn't there. Her eyes held no fear, only a quiet sorrow, and a resolve that startled him. "You knew this would happen," he said. "I hoped it wouldn't," she answered. But the stars whispered. The creatures hid. The Patronuses changed. They weren't just reacting. They were preparing. For us. For us, he asked. She reached for his hand. Her skin was cold, but her grip was sure. "We're not just two people, Harry, with a balance. You, love lost, love endured. Me, love unseen, love unshaken. Together we're what the light needs." The veil tore. A wave of darkness erupted, howling with the voices of the forgotten. The silver dome buckled. Witches cried out as their Patronuses flickered. One by one the lights began to dim. Harry raised his wand, not to cast, but to offer. He poured everything into the light, not just courage, not just memory, but the ache of years, the quiet moments with Ginny, the laughter of his children, the ghost of his parents' hands on his shoulders. He thought of Ron's loyalty, Hermione's wisdom, the warmth of a hearth at Hogwarts. And beside him, Luna did the same. Her light wasn't born of loss, but of wonder, of creatures no one believed in, of her mother's lullabies, of dandelions, growing through stone, of belief, even when the world called it madness. Their Patronuses, stag and hare, leaped forward as one, merging not into a single beast, but into a single light. A column of silver fire shot upwards, splitting the sky. The shadow recoiled. The veil trembled. And for the first time from beyond the arch, something answered. Not with hunger, but with silence, with recognition. The choice was made. The air in the Chamber of Secrets was thick with the scent of damp stone and ancient magic, but it was the silence that pressed heaviest against Harry's skin. Luna stood beside him, her breath a soft rhythm in the darkness, her wand held low. The silver glow of her Patronus, a hair now transformed into something greater, drifted just above her shoulder, its form shifting like liquid moonlight. It no longer looked like an animal. It looked like a being, tall and slender, with eyes like twin stars and a cloak woven from shimmering threads of memory. Harry's own Patronus had changed, too. Where the stag once bounded with proud grace, now stood a figure wreathed in light, its antlers replaced by branching waves of silver energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. It didn't speak, not in words, but its presence filled Harry's mind with visions, fragments of laughter in a sunlit kitchen, a woman's lullaby, hummed through a cracked door, a man's hand ruffling his hair. Memories not his own. Memories that were never lived. "They're not just protecting us," Luna whispered, her voice echoing faintly. "They're remembering for us." Harry swallowed. "Remembering what?" Luna reached out, her fingers brushing the edge of her guardian's light. It didn't burn. Instead, warmth spread up her arm, and for a moment her eyes glowed silver. The first time the veil was torn, not by Death Eaters, not by curiosity, but by grief. A love so deep it broke the boundary between worlds. And something slipped through. A low hum filled the chamber, rising from the cracked stone floor. The two guardians turned toward the archway at the far end. The veil, still hanging, still whispering. But now the tattered curtain shivered with unnatural light, strands of silver threading through the black fabric like veins in marble. "They've been guarding more than just us," Harry said, realization cold in his chest. They'd been holding it back. The guardians drifted forward, moving in unison. As they approached the veil, their forms began to dissolve, not into nothing, but into streams of light that wove around the archway, sealing the cracks, reinforcing the ancient wards. The whispers grew louder, pleading, mournful, furious. Luna stepped forward, her voice steady. "You don't have to do this." The light pulsed. A single image formed in the air between them, a woman with kind eyes, and a silver locket, standing before a door made of starlight. She smiled, then turned, and walked through. The door closed behind her. "She chose to go," Luna breathed, "and you followed. To keep her memory alive. To keep the door closed." Harry felt tears on his cheeks. He hadn't even noticed he was crying. All this time, the Patronuses weren't just symbols of hope. They were anchors, tethering the living to the dead, holding the world together. A low groan echoed from beyond the veil. Something was pushing against it. Shadows seeped through the silver threads, twisting like smoke. "They can't hold it forever," Luna said. "No," Harry agreed, "but we can help." He stepped forward, hand outstretched. The remains of his guardian flowed into him, not as a surge of power, but as a deep, quiet understanding. Love was not just a defense. It was a bridge, and sometimes bridges had to be broken to keep darkness from crossing. Luna took his hand. Her guardian merged with his, and together, their combined light shot forward, weaving into the veil, reinforcing the seal. The shadow shrieked and recoiled, but the cost was written in the silence that followed. The warmth faded, the light dimmed, the guardians were gone. "They gave everything," Luna said softly. Harry squeezed her hand. "So we remember, for them, for everyone." And in the silence of the chamber, beneath the weight of centuries, two hearts beat as one, carrying the light forward, long after the magic had faded. The air in the Department of Mysteries was thick with silence, a silence that pressed against the eardrums like deep water. Harry stood at the edge of the dais, his fingers brushing the crumbling stone of the archway. The veil hung there, tattered and whispering, its fabric shifting in a wind that didn't exist. His stag, Patronus, flickered at his side, not bright and proud as it once had been, but dim, pulsing like a wounded heart. It nudged his hand gently, insistently. Luna stood a few paces behind, barefoot on the cold marble. She had removed her shoes before stepping into the chamber, saying the stone remembered too much pain to be walked upon carelessly. Her silver-blue hair caught the faint, sourceless light, like moonlight on frost. Her Patronus, a hare, was not beside her. It stood star within star the veil, one translucent paw lifted as if testing a stream. "Luna, you can't," Harry said, his voice low. "We don't know what's beyond." Sirius was pulled," she said softly. "This is different. It's not pulling. It's listening." The hare turned its head, ears twitching. And then, for the first time, it spoke, not in sound, but in thought, clear and cool, as a bell through both their minds. "She is the key, he is the lock. Together, the door breathes." Star Harry staggered back. "Did you hear that?" Luna nodded, her eyes wide and unafraid. "They've been trying to tell us for weeks. The Patronuses aren't just protectors. They're memories, echoes of love that refuse to die, and something beyond the veil, it's remembering too." Outside, the sky over London had turned the color of tarnished silver. Birds had stopped singing at noon. Even the enchanted ceiling in the ministry atrium had gone still, frozen in a moment of twilight. Luna stepped forward, her toes curling against the cold stone. The veil wasn't meant to be a tomb, it was a threshold. But when people stopped believing in what came after, when grief became heavier than love, it began to close. And now, something is trying to force it open from the other side. "The resurrection," Harry whispered, remembering the prophecy fragment they'd found in the ruins of an old wizard's tower, scorched parchment, ink like ash. "Star, when the light forgets its name, the forgotten shall rise and the watchers shall choose." Star Luna smiled then, small and sad. "They're not forgotten. We've just stopped listening." She reached into her robes and pulled out a small, opalescent stone, moonstone, carved with runes older than Hogwarts. "My mother left this to me," she said. "It holds a promise. That love spoken aloud never truly fades." Harry's chest tightened. "What are you going to do?" "Answer the call," she said. Before he could stop her, Luna stepped through the veil. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the arch blazed, not with fire, but with light, pure and silver white, flooding the chamber, like dawn breaking across centuries. The stag reared, radiant again, its antlers brushing the ceiling. The veil trembled, its tattered edges knitting together, fabric weaving itself from strands of light and memory, and from within, Luna's voice, soft but clear, said, "Come, bring the light." Harry hesitated only a moment. Then he stepped forward. Beyond was not darkness. It was a meadow under a sky full of slow-moving stars, trees made of mist, and a path paved with names, whispered, remembered, cherished. Luna stood there, glowing faintly, her hand clasped around something unseen. The hair sat beside her, whole and bright, and behind her, faint but growing shapes began to form, figures with kind eyes, hands outstretched, not demanding return, but offering peace. It was never about bringing them back, Luna said, turning to him. It was about letting them go, with love. The veil pulsed once, then stilled, not closed, not open, balanced, and somewhere, deep in the heart of the world, a clock that had stopped 1,000 years ago began to tick again. The first light of dawn crept over the highlands like a whispered secret, soft and pale gold spilling across the moors where frost still clung to the heather. Harry stood at the edge of a crumbling stone circle, his breath curling in the crisp air, his wand tucked in his coat pocket, but his fingers twitching toward it all the same. The ground here still hummed, a faint vibration beneath his boots, as if the earth remembered what had passed beneath it. The veil had sealed, or at least, sealed enough, but the scars remained. In the trees, a stag moved silently between the birches, its antlers catching the early light. Not quite solid, not quite ghost, his Patronus. It didn't vanish now, not entirely. It lingered, like a guardian who had forgotten how to leave. He heard footsteps behind him, light and unhurried. Luna appeared beside him, her silver-white hair loose and tangled from the wind, her eyes distant but present. Her hair sat a few paces away, nose twitching, one ear swiveling toward the east. Like his, it had not faded when summoned. Like his, it watched. "They're not just spells anymore," she said, voice quiet as mist. "They're memories with teeth." Harry nodded. He had dreamed the night before, not of fire or pain, but of voices beneath the lake at Hogwarts, of whispers in the branches of the forbidden forest, of 1,000 lost souls singing in unison behind the veil. And in the dream his stag had turned its head to him and said, "Star, you listened. Star." The world was mending. In Diagon Alley, witches lit their hearths with renewed charm fire, and children laughed as they knew Patronuses, hawks, foxes, moths, even a tiny dragon, fluttered at their heels. The ministry called it a post-phenomenon normalization, but Harry knew better. Things didn't just change and then stop. They evolved, grew, remembered. At Hogwarts, the Cestrals no longer needed death to be seen. They walked the grounds in broad daylight, sleek and silent, their eyes knowing. The centaurs had stopped speaking of stars and begun speaking of balance. Even Hagrid had found a new creature in the forest, something with too many eyes and a voice like wind through stone, that only Luna could approach. And then there was them. He glanced at her now, at the way the morning light caught the faint shimmer around her, the almost imperceptible trail of silver mist that followed her like a second shadow. They hadn't spoken of it, not really, but they both felt it. A thread between them, spun from moonlight and memory, from midnight wanderings and words left unsaid. When their Patronuses stood together, the stag and the hare, the air between them hummed like a plucked string. "They're still watching," Luna murmured, tilting her head toward the hare. "Not just us, the edges, the corners between seconds." Harry exhaled. "You think it's over?" She smiled, small, sad, sure. "Nothing ever ends, Harry, it just changes shape." A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. Somewhere beyond the hills, a wolf howled, but it wasn't a wolf. He knew that sound. It was a Patronus calling. One of many now scattered across the land, wild and waking, guarding places no one remembered. He reached out, not thinking, and brushed his fingers against hers. Warm, real, alive. And for the first time in years, the stag at his side lowered its head, not in warning, but in peace. The fire in the hearth of the old inn crackled low, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone walls. Outside, a thin veil of rain whispered against the windows. blurring the world beyond into a watercolor of gray and silver. Harry sat on the edge of the worn sofa, his fingers idly tracing the rim of a chipped mug that still held the faint warmth of tea. Luna was across from him, bare feet tucked beneath her on the armchair, her wand balanced delicately on her knee like a sleeping bird. She wasn't looking at him, but at the flames, her expression soft, unreadable. "I used to think," she said at last, her voice like wind through dry grass, that loneliness was just another kind of silence, that if you waited long enough, the quiet would teach you something important. Harry turned to her, his green eyes reflecting the ember glow. "And now?" she smiled faintly. "Now I think silence is just another word for waiting." "And we've waited long enough." He exhaled slowly, the weight of her words settling over his shoulders like a cloak too long carried. For weeks, months, they'd been chasing whispers, following the strange behavior of their Patronuses like threads through a labyrinth. His stag now flickered with silver streaks of something older, something watchful. Hers, once a delicate hair, had grown into something luminous and half-formed, like a creature emerging from mist. They'd seen things together, echoes beneath standing stones, the air trembling at the edge of forgotten forests, voices in the spaces between spells. And through it all, they learned to trust not just the magic pulling them forward, but each other. "I almost didn't come to you that night," Harry admitted. "After the first change, I thought it was just grief or guilt, that maybe I was seeing what I wanted to see." Luna tilted her head slightly. "But you came anyway, because it felt like a pull," he said. "Not just in the magic, in here." He tapped his chest just over his heart. "And when I saw you, when I saw how calm you were, like it all made sense, I realized I'd been afraid to hope." She reached out then, not touching him, but hovering her hand just above his on the armrest. "Hope isn't dangerous, Harry. It's the most dangerous thing in the world. That's why people lock it away." He turned his hand, palm up, an invitation. Her fingers settled into his, cool and steady. "When the Patronuses began speaking, really speaking, I wasn't surprised. Not truly. I've always believed them more than just protection. They're pieces of us, but also pieces of something else. Something older than memory." He nodded. "They chose us, not just to warn us, to bring us together." "Yes." The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the flue. Rain tapped a quiet rhythm against the glass. "I don't know what's coming," he said. "I don't know if we're meant to stop it or survive it or become part of it. But I do know this. I've spent so much of my life thinking I had to face things alone. That love was a risk. That loss was inevitable. And now?" she asked again, softer this time. "Now I think love might be the only thing that isn't a risk," he said, turning his hand to intertwine their fingers. "Because it's already here. It's been here, even when we didn't name it." Luna's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something deeper, recognition perhaps, understanding. "You once told me that happiness was the key to the Patronus, but I think you were wrong." He raised an eyebrow. "No," she whispered, "it's not happiness, it's truth, and we've only just begun to speak ours." Outside, the wind stilled. The rain slowed, and for the first time in a long while the world felt not like a warning, but a promise. The air over the Hogwarts grounds shimmered with the soft, pearlescent light of 1,000 Patronuses, rising like spirits released from sleeps. Students, teachers, and former fighters of the war stood shoulder to shoulder on the sloping lawns, wands raised, voices steady or trembling, as they summoned memories of love, of laughter, of survival. A stag burst forth from Harry's wand, its antlers catching the afternoon sun like gilded wire, and it leapt forward, graceful, familiar, yet somehow different. It turned its head toward him, not in recognition, but with something like question in its eyes. Harry frowned, and had never done that before. Beside him, Luna Lovegood's otter spiraled through the air in playful loops, but then paused mid-twist, floating in place like a creature, listening to a sound no one else could hear. Its dark, bead-like eyes fixed on the forbidden forest. Luna tilted her head, her wand lowering slightly. "It wants to go," she murmured, more to herself than anyone. Harry glanced at her. "What do you mean, wants to go?" Luna didn't answer at first. The otter dipped its nose toward the ground, then shot forward, not in joy, but with purpose, racing toward the tree line like a messenger with urgent news. A hush fell over the nearest group as they watched it vanish between the ancient oaks. "That's not right," Harry said, his voice low. His own stag stood still now, nostrils flaring, as it too turned towards the forest. The air had cooled, though the sun still hung high. A breeze carried the scent of damp earth, and something sharper, ozone, like the aftermath of lightning. Around them, others began to notice. A phoenix Patronus faltered mid-flight, its wings stuttering before darting westward. A silver heron abandoned its caster, and skimmed low over the lake, vanishing into the mist above the water. Murmurs spread. Laughter died. Even the youngest students sensed the shift. Professor McGonagall stepped forward, a tammy cat pacing at her heels. But the feline did not follow her as she walked. Instead, it stared into the sky, where a cluster of Patronuses, dozen, maybe more, were converging, swirling into a spiral above the forest's edge. The shapes moved in unison, not as random animals, but as if guided by a single mind. "That hasn't happened before," Neville said, joining Harry, his own hair trembling at his side before suddenly bolting toward the others. Luna closed her eyes, fingers brushing her wand tip. "They're not just changing," she whispered. "They're waking up." Harry felt it then, a pressure behind his eyes, a whisper at the edge of hearing. Not words, not quite, but meaning. Images flashing behind his eyelids. A whisper at the edge of hearing. Not words, not quite, but meaning. Images flashing behind his eyelids. A veil fluttering in a hidden chamber. A voice without a body. Something vast and ancient stirring in the dark between worlds. And then his stag turned fully, lowered its head, and nudged his hand. Not playfully, but insistently, urging him to move. "I think," Harry said, voice tight, "we should follow them." Luna opened her eyes. They were wide, unblinking. "I think they've been waiting for us to listen." Above, the spiral of Patronuses pulsed once like a heartbeat made of light, and then streaked into the forest as one. The ground seemed to sigh beneath their passing. No one spoke, no one moved, except Harry and Luna, who stepped forward together, wands alight, following the silver trail into the trees. Behind them, the ceremony unraveled into silence, the joy of remembrance, now shadowed by something older, deeper, and far less forgiving. The air atop the tor was thin and sharp, with the scent of damp stone and wild thyme, the kind of cold that seeped into bones and stayed. Below, the patchwork of Devon's moors stretched beneath a sky, slowly lightening from black to bruised violet. No stars remained, not even a sliver of moon, just a vast, breathless silence, as if the world were holding its last moment before dawn in trembling anticipation. Harry exhaled, watching his breath curl like smoke into the night. His fingers brushed the hilt of the old dagger at his belt, Morgana's blade, its runes long since faded, but its edge still keen. He didn't know if it would be enough. Nothing had been enough before. Beside him, Luna stood barefoot on the moss-slick rock, her silver hair lifted by a wind that didn't touch the trees below. Her eyes were closed, but her lips moved soundlessly, echoing the chant the stones had whispered to her in dreams. The last of the warding sigils glowed faintly beneath their feet, etched into the ancient granite in a language older than Hogwarts. They pulsed like slow heartbeats. "It's coming," she murmured. He didn't ask how she knew. He felt it too, the pressure in his chest, the way the air tasted suddenly of iron and rain. The Patronus. His stag had not appeared in weeks, not since the cave beneath Dinas Emrys, where it had spoken to him in a voice like wind through reeds. "Star, you are not the first it has tried to warn Star," it had said. "Star, but you may be the last who listens. Star." And Luna's hair, once silent, now a constant presence, flickering at the edge of vision, nudging her toward rooms half buried in peat, singing lullabies in dead dialects, had led them here. A ripple passed through the dark. The stars didn't return. Instead, the void between worlds opened, not with a sound, but with an absence of one. The veil had never fully torn. It had only frayed, and something ancient had been slipping through, thread by thread, feeding on forgotten grief, on memories too bright to endure. But now the threads were being pulled back. Harry saw it first, a shimmer in the air, like heat rising from stone. Then the Patronuses came. Not just his, not just Luna's, dozens, hundreds, Stags and hares and otters and swans, foxes and falcons and creatures with too many eyes and limbs that bent wrong. They emerged from the earth, the sky, the silence itself, each one glowing with a soft silver light. They moved in unison, forming a spiral above the tour, circling faster, weaving a net of light across the sky. Luna reached for Harry's hand. Her fingers were ice, but her grip was sure. "They're not just protecting," she said, voice hushed with wonder. "They're remembering, for all of us." One by one, the Patronuses released something, a flicker of memory, a fragment of joy, a laugh stolen from childhood, a touch from someone long gone. They fed the light, feeding the seal. The wound in the veil began to close, not with force, but with sorrow and love, stitched shut by what magic remembered itself to be. Harry felt it then, not a voice, but a presence, vast and gentle, pressing against his mind like a hand on his shoulder. "Star, thank you, star," it seemed to say. Or perhaps it was just the wind. The last thing he saw before the light collapsed inward was his stag, turning once to look at him, eyes deep with something like gratitude, before vanishing into the dawn. When the sun finally rose, there were no fanfares, no thunder, just birdsong, and dew on the grass, and the soft rustle of Luna's cloak as she sat down on the stone, breathing deeply. "It's gone," she said. "For now," Harry replied. He looked at his hands. His wand felt heavier. The scar on his forehead no longer ached, but it was different, lighter somehow, changed. Luna smiled, small and quiet. "Magic is different too. Can you feel it? Like a song that's found its true tune." He could. The world seemed sharper, kinder, as if grief had not been erased but understood. And when that evening his Patronus returned, just for a moment, in the hearth's glow, stepping from the fire with antlers tipped in starlight, it didn't speak. It only bowed its head, then faded. Harry smiled. For the first time in years he felt not like a survivor, but like someone who belonged. The wind carried the scent of rain through the open window, brushing across Harry's face as he stood in the kitchen, a chipped mug warm in his hands. Outside, the sky was softening from twilight into night, the first stars appearing like pinpricks in a deepening bruise of blue. He didn't hear Luna come in. She moved like mist over stone, but he felt her presence, a quiet shift in the air, the way the light seemed to bend just slightly when she was near. "You're thinking again," she said, her voice low and calm, like a lullaby hummed beneath breath. He turned, offering a small smile. "Is it that obvious?" She stepped forward, bare feet silent on the worn wooden floor, and took the mug from him, blowing gently across the surface of the tea. "Your Patronus flickers when you're lost in your thoughts, like a candle in a draught." He looked past her, toward the garden, where silver light curled just beyond the tree line, soft, shifting, alive. His stag stood there, head raised, watching the trees, and beside it, Luna's hair, ears twitching, eyes glowing like twin moons. They didn't charge or vanish, they simply remained. Guardians, companions. "They don't leave anymore, do they?" he asked. "No," she said, sipping the tea. "They've chosen to stay." It had been nearly a year since the veil had trembled, since the whispers beneath the world had risen, and then receded like a tide pulled back by something older than magic. The forgotten temple beneath Dinas Emeris had crumbled into silence, the shadow that had gathered there dispersed, not destroyed, but sealed, for now. The cost had been steep, dreams lost, memories fractured, a year of nights haunted by echoes of what might have been, but they had stood together at the edge of the abyss, and the light had answered. Now, the magical world had returned to its rhythms. The ministry issued reports about atypical Patronus manifestations, and filed them under temporary anomalies. No one spoke of the voices, the visions, the way some animals had walked backward in circles for weeks after the event. But Harry knew, Luna knew, and the Patronuses knew. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Luna's face. "Do you ever wonder if they were always this way? If we just forgot how to listen?" She tilted her head, considering. "I think love remembers, even when people don't. They've always been more than protection, Harry. They're pieces of us, pieces that never forget." He nodded slowly. There had been nights when he woke to the sound of hooves on stone, only to find his stag standing at the foot of the bed, watching. Nights when Luna whispered to her hair in a language he didn't know, and the creature answered with a soft pulse of light. They weren't just charms anymore. They were part of the house now, part of the silence between words, part of the way their hands found each other without looking. Outside, the wind stirred again, and the two figures of light turned as one, facing the forest. A pause, then slowly they dipped their heads, once, and faded, not vanishing, but sinking into the earth, into the trees, into the air itself, gone, but not absent. Luna set the mug down and took his hand. They'll return when needed. He squeezed her fingers, feeling the warmth, the steadiness of her. And until then we live, she said simply. We tend the garden, we write nonsense letters to old friends. We leave the windows open. He laughed soft and real. And we keep listening. Always, she whispered, and in the quiet that settled around them, in the hush between breath and heartbeat, there was no fear, only the sense of something vast and gentle watching, waiting, loving, not fate, not destiny, just light, always.